into session for our March 15th, 2011 agenda items. Would we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have the following announcement. Last week, the board did meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, conference with legal counsel concerning existing litigation, arbitration, Winifred Wilson versus the County of Calaveras. There was no reportable action that came out of that closed session. We'll move forward then to the consent agenda items. All items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without further discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested member of the public may request that any item on the consent agenda be removed for further discussion prior to the board's taking action. The consent agenda is made up of items 1 through 8 inclusive. Does any board member wish to pull any item on the consent agenda?
Number 3, please.
Number 3.
And I'd like to pull the Mountain Ranch number 4.
There, number 4. Steve. Any staff member wish to pull any item on the consent agenda? Is there any member of the public here present this morning that has any item on the consent agenda they wish to have discussed? George.
I just want to, for the record, also want to share that I'd like to see number 4 pulled.
Okay, let's pull. Number 4 we'll discuss.
Thank you very much, Supervisor.
There was a young lady over here who was raising her hand. Do you have an item you wish to have pulled? Number 4. Okay. That completes it. Then the chair is open for a motion on the balance of the consent agenda as presented.
I make a motion.
I have a motion by Supervisor Spellman, a second by?
I'll second.
Supervisor Tofinelli. Do I have further board discussion? All in favor so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the Board of Supervisors. We'll go back to item 3, a resolution authorizing changes to the position control list. Darren, you pulled this. Do you have you would like to initiate the discussion?
Yes. I would like Ms. Sawicki or whoever's involved with that to come back with more information. Once again, I'm seeing something before me in the packet here that does not give me the appropriate amount of information to make an informed decision. I think it's widely known that I have served in and out of public positions, public and private as well, in business. And when I was in business at one time, my responsibility was to manage a particular business and also take care of the marketing of that business and the people who marketed and who they marketed to, with budgets, constraints, and those type of things like that. What I see right here before me appears to be $124,000 for someone to do marketing for food stamps. It says that this person will be doing community outreach to find more people that could benefit from the Fresh Foods, aka food stamps program. To me, in layman's terms, from a business perspective, that's called marketing. You're giving a marketing budget of $124,000 to someone to go out and market to get more people on food stamps. That's what I see right now. So what I'd like is for someone to give further explanation of this, and I hope to prove my theory wrong, that this is not marketing money to increase food stamp rolls.
Okay. Mary Sawicki, Director of Calaveras Works Human Services. This is just requesting the control numbers, the position through Human Resources for the grant that was approved by you previously for our outreach. It's the federal. It's part of the federal $350,000 that we got for our county. The amount for the department's part was $120-something thousand. That money is primarily for to provide eligibility worker time in doing food stamp applications as a result of the increase of the overall premise of the grant, which is to increase public access to all public benefits and community services. And it is not $120-something for marketing. It's primarily for the work that the department does in approving applications, which we expect an increase on.
Was it not listed here that says it's for community outreach and other various?
Well, the other part of it is, there's two parts to the grant. The grant, that, as we talked about previously, that you approved as a board, was to enable the department to access and provide information to people who are not on public assistance, but who are eligible for it for a variety of reasons. Whether
Marketing. Letting people know
the other part
about
of
the product.
The other part of the grant is to enable the public that also is in need of services to access community services as well. There's a whole big technological piece to this grant. And it's a combination of the Amador Tuolumne Community Action Agency, the food bank, and ourselves.
I would love to see the money go to the food bank. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. But
The food bank is getting money.
This appears to me, and it continues to be looking more like this is just a marketing piece. Whether or not you're using the money for printing brochures for marketing, or whether you're hiring a person to do the physical work, the legwork of the marketing, it's still marketing. The other thing that concerns me about this is it says the grant has a time frame from September 2010 to September 2011. Mm-hmm. If the board were to approve this today, we would only have 6 months in the 12-month window that is ascribed for this grant. That means we would be spending $124,000 in a 6-month window, ending in September 2011. That's the information I have here in my packet.
Okay, there's a couple of different parts. You have to think of the $120-something thousand is the overall amount to the department, okay? And then each one of the partners, the food bank, receives a separate allocation in Amador Tuolumne Community Action Agency. As I said previously when you approved the grant before, the additional funds that are in this grant are for a variety of things. They're for a facilitator that is in the grant. We have another researcher, which is a part of the evidence base required by the federal government in that amount of money.
A researcher?
Yes.
What kind of
Dr.
research?
Francis Yoon.
Excuse me?
Dr. Francis Yoon, he's from Sacramento State University.
And what kind of research is he conducting?
He is doing the research to see if our efforts do increase the amount of people who access both public benefits and community services.
So he's being paid to substantiate whether or not the money that's spent on marketing food stamps is successful.
It's not just an issue of food stamps. I'm going to come back to that. It's an issue of people being able to access both public benefits and community services.
Wouldn't it be safe to
community
say
services
that,
could be a wide range of things.
Wouldn't it be safe to say that in an economic situation that we find ourselves in right now as a state and a nation, and even here locally, that numbers of people signing up for food stamps would be a no-brainer? I mean, do we really need a professor at Sacramento State to tell us that there's going to be more people that want food stamps?
The issue of the researcher is to look at to say what strategies actually work in enabling people who normally would be eligible but may not be aware of their eligibility for a variety of public benefits and community services.
Well, I'd like to have more of that explained to me in writing before it comes to the board again, if you wouldn't mind. And I hope that perhaps there can be a breakdown of where these things are going to end up. You know, all I see before me right now is $124,000 skimmed off a $350,000 grant, and it's to be primarily for one person to be hired to do community outreach to make sure people get food stamps. There's a food bank down the street from my house in Rancho Calaveras at the Good Samaritan Church, and they don't do any marketing that I know of that costs any extensive amount of money other than to have a banner flyer out in front of their church. People show up there and they get food. If people are in need of food, they'll find a way. I don't think that spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote people to do legwork to let people know that they can get food stamps is really appropriate in this economy. But continue if you have something you'd like to add.
I was just going to comment. I'm the one that prepared the packet before you, and the packet that was submitted a couple of weeks ago that came from the department directly about the grant, the more specifics about it, and the utilization was brought before the board, and the board approved it. Typically, procedurally, we would like to, at the same time, have the resolution, so when the board approves the grant, they would also be approving anything that goes with it. It didn't occur because they needed to get it through because they received the grant late. So in this packet here, I try to summarize what had already been before the board.
Right.
So that's typically what I do, and they can't move forward with the grant without the one piece of it. I mean, there are other things, as Mary said, that are associated with it, but I wanted to make sure that you understood that procedurally, a resolution making changes, you cannot
Right.
add any staff without doing that.
I understand the human resource side of it.
Okay.
I'm just
I just wanna
questioning
make
the
sure.
legitimacy of what that person who's hired will be doing. And also the time frame, when there's only 6 months left until September 2011. So we're already halfway into the 12-month window. So have we already been spending money that we didn't have to spend, knowing or hoping that we were going to get this? Or are we going to be spending double the amount of money because we only have 6 months to spend it, so let's burn it up quick?
We have already
That's a
asked the
good
federal
question.
government for an extension, and we anticipate receiving that.
That would be nice to know when I get a packet like this that we've asked for an extension, that we could use the money longer than the window. Because to me, it looks like we're just going to burn it up as fast as we can before that September 2011 date, and that does not set well.
Okay.
Be more than happy to send you any information on the actual position.
Okay, I'll bring it. Excuse me, Steve?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions, Mary.
Could you pull the microphone, please?
Have a couple of questions for the director. Just so we can get some context for this, over the last 2 years, what has been the increase in the general assistance population, people who are on general assistance in this county?
General assistance has probably increased about 70-something%.
And food stamps?
Food stamp it varies, but it actually has probably, at this point, I'd have to take a look at the most recent figures, but I believe we're at probably double the amount as previously.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, we've reduced staff in your department over that period of time
A third, yes.
by 33%.
Yeah.
So we've doubled the need, and we've cut the staff by a third, and in some effort to close the gap, we've put forward a proposal here. We also recognize, and I want to ask you this, have we done any kind of survey about what portions of the county are not accessing this? Are there transportation issues? Are there remote issues? And is this outreach to try to make contact with people who are not aware of these benefits and are in considerable need of them?
Yeah, it's the reason why we opened up the 8 outreach stations is because people were not able to come in 28, 30 or more miles from where they live down to San Andreas one way. Transportation was an issue, certainly I know from your district. And so this part of the outreach grant is to enable people to receive services where they're at. And this grant was what we call the second phase of it. We applied for it. We were one of 5 in the nation that received that grant.
So might understand that not only are we giving...
Excuse me, I'm not done, and I would like to finish, please. I have some more questions. I also, trying to remember my train of thought at the moment. I'm wondering whether you're familiar with the private sector commentary on public sector work, that it needs to be more accountable.
Yes.
Is the study and review that we're partly funding through this an effort to make sure that the work that we do is accountable and that we have spent the money wisely and that there's been the effect desired, which is to make sure that all people equally, regardless of station, regardless of geography, regardless of culture, regardless of background, have equal access to services?
Yes, it is. And it is a requirement to have the evidence-based research as part of the grant. It was a prerequisite from the federal government.
One other question. We did get this late due to due to circumstances not under our control.
Right.
If we delayed this today, does that further compact the time frame potentially?
Yes, because basically we received the grant late. We are waiting for this position so that we can hire someone to do the applications piece, so that we could then do the second part, which is the continued outreach piece. It's a domino effect within the office, yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Are there any other public comments on item 3?
I have a question for Mrs. Sawicki.
Oh, okay. Mary, hold on.
Okay.
Ms. Sawicki, based on the things that the Supervisor Walensky mentioned, am I to understand that not only do we have goods and services for people who are in need, which I believe is appropriate, but that if these people are not able to make it down to San Andreas or somewhere to collect these goods and services, that we are delivering them out into the community?
We have outreach stations in various locations, senior center, community centers, some of the Mark Twain clinics, etc. They're like a day or 2 days a week, so that people are able to sign up. We have had repeated clients come in and say that if we were not in those particular locations, they had no ability to access these services.
Okay. So based on Mr. Walensky's questions and your answers, the number of people that are drawing on public assistance has gone up by 70%?
It was 68 to 70% for general assistance. Each program has different rates.
And food stamp has doubled?
Has at least doubled, if not tripled, yes.
Okay.
During this time.
You know, if I may, a suggestion, I'd like to see some of the funding focused more on providing food or services that these people need rather than for people to run around and tell, do marketing. I mean, that's basically what the crux of this is for me. I mean, there are several different issues, but, it seems to me that with the increase of 70% in public assistance and doubling of food stamps in the last 2 years, coupled with the fact that you have 30 people less on the staff or 30% less staffing, that it doesn't really require anybody to approach the community to market this to people. People are in need and they're finding these services, and I would like to see the money focused on actually providing something to the people rather than somebody to go out and shake hands with people and tell them that there's food stamps at the county if they need it or whatever. I mean, I'd like to see the money directed more towards getting in the hands of actually food in people's hands at the food bank or things like that.
And you need to know, today, given today's economy and prices, et cetera, that most people who are in need of food not only go to the food pantries, and by the way, we are working with the church and all the various food pantries with the food bank, but the other part of it is it doesn't provide all the food that's needed necessarily. Sometimes some of the pantries are only once a month, and there isn't enough food to go around. You can talk to Jeannie Hayward. She's one of our key partners in this. So what we do is do a combination of working on enabling people to receive what's now called CalFresh, no longer food stamps, but it's in essence the same thing, and as well as to be subsidized as well with the pantry. Today, people need both. It's just a fact and reality of life.
I guess my final thought for you would be that, obviously I don't want people to take away the idea that there's people in need. I understand that, and I want them to get what they need. I just want to make sure, because I just don't have enough information in these packets to tell me where the money is going. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure if these people are paying their tax dollars, that they are going to people who are in need and not to fund extra people that are redundant or not necessary. That is the crux of my position. Not that I'm trying to take any food stamps away from anybody. I want people to get that if they need it. That's what we pay money for. But I just don't want it to be spent on bureaucracy. I don't want it to be spent on computers, rent money, extra people that aren't necessary, all those type of things. So if you could bring something that tells me, delineates with better detail and scope where these things are going, that would make me feel much better.
I don't have any difficulty providing that information to you in writing. And may I also offer that in the future, if you have any questions, I have talked to many of the board members before the meeting when they have questions on a particular issue. I don't automatically, like most department heads, go to every board member beforehand to say, do you have any questions or issues, because all of you are very busy.
I am very busy, but I need to, again, I have a fiduciary responsibility. Yeah. So I am busy, but I do ask questions, and I will continue to ask questions because I need to have answers.
And I'm still going to make the offer to sit down and talk to you about all of our variety of Services. The only equipment, just to let you know, that's in that grant is equipment that's to go out to the community to enable them to access the food stamp application and any documents that they need to be scanned in. That is part of the, because we're moving basically to paperless files. That is the only thing that's in there.
Is there a possibility that we could give some of these monies to the public libraries then? I heard a concern yesterday that there was a lady who made a concern that the only way that she had access to a computer was at the Copperopolis Library, and they're talking that may have some trouble staying open because of finances. So in the same breath where you're talking about these people being able to access and fill out these food stamp things, I think that's something where the library provides an ability for people to do that through the computers there. So is there a way that you could funnel some of this money to the libraries?
It may be a possibility. The other thing, too, is Sally Burdick, who does Copperopolis, actually has an office there in the Mark Twain Clinic 2 days a week. And, one of the things we're looking at also is enabling the folks to have computers to fill out their applications right there. So that's all part of the grant. It's all part of hooking up using technology and getting people to have greater access. Whether we use the library or not will depend upon, whether we can make it where they have a confidential space.
Those are the things I need to know. I need to know that there's not 2 computer systems and 2 software programs, and that the library and these other human resources can function together, so that we're not doubling or overbuying things that we don't need, and therefore taking money out of the mouths of people who need the food to spend on computers where we have 2 computers.
We don't do that.
I would certainly hope not, and I look forward to hearing how we can do that.
And I'll send you a detailed budget list.
Let me see if there are any other public comments on this issue.
Good morning, George Fry, Angels Camp, certainly. I'm shocked and aghast. In these economic times, with people struggling to find jobs, who are jobless, who are trying to find ways to meet their ends, to feed their families, to clothe their families, put a roof over their families, that we are discussing this. I understand Supervisor Spellman's concern. I asked, when is it that the supervisors get their packets, and how much time between the time they get their packets and the time that the board meets here in the chambers? There is an opportunity for each and every supervisor to contact those department heads after they have read their packets and have developed questions. I spent 10 years working in the land use planning department here at the government center, and I can't tell you the number of times, countless times, that people came to our office, supervisors came to our office and wanted further explanation, even though I believe we presented a tremendous amount of explanation on issues, land use issues. So I understand that you have your opinion, Supervisor Spellman, but you're not the only person in this room that has an opinion. This is a time when we need to have more sensitivity than we've ever had to have in these trying economic times. I leave you with one statement, a statement that I'm sure that everybody has heard time and time again. It is but for the grace of God that go I. And there are people in our county that don't have that grace because they're unemployed and they don't know how they're going to get the ends to meet. I would encourage everybody in this room and everybody in this county. I have banged the drum for many years about volunteerism. At least 2 board members spend a lot of time, board members of the supervisors, spend a lot of time volunteering their time and giving back to our entire community. I would encourage the rest of you to do the same. I have been doing it for over 40 years, and it's a labor of love. We need to help our people. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? I'm going to limit the discussion to 3 minutes, so because we need to move forward. We're almost a half hour. We haven't gotten through the consent agenda yet.
Al Segallen, Calaveras County Chamber of Commerce. And I just touch on what Georgia said. I think we're moving in the wrong direction when we talk about taking money, using armed force, using police power from some people in the community and giving it to other people. The thing that I really agree with is this idea of people helping each other in a voluntary way. Sometimes it's called charity. I think George referred to it as voluntarism. And that ought to be more the direction that we go than to look to the taxpayer. We probably are going into rougher times than we even have now. And if we can approach these rough times based on principles that work, such as limited government and people helping people, we can come out of it a stronger country and a stronger community. But if we go into it with the idea that we need to tax people more in order because we care so much about the people that have no food, then we're going to end up destroying the very system that creates that food. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Joe Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Spellman. I appreciate what you brought up, especially the concept of the 1 year, that 6 months of it's already gone. Mr. Walensky, you discussed about accountability. I would say perhaps within that accountability, we also look at the concept of transparency. That's a lot which is wrong with this county. It was just brought up by the director that she goes to you folks on Mondays to see if you have any questions. I particularly like it when it comes out that the questions are asked by you folks of the department heads, so that we, the people, have an inclusion into understanding what's going on rather than behind the scenes discussions. The issue of the grant extension is a prime example of transparency. It could have been added in. I had questions as to why is it a 1-year program? We're 6 months into it. Mr. Spellman brought it up. You brought up accountability. I thank both of you for that. But another thing we need to have in this concept of accountability and transparency is, what's the administration cost of this grant program? Because normally with a grant goes along a program cost of about 20%. So I'd like to know what that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'm closing off public comments. I'm bringing it back to the board. Is there further board discussion? The chair is open for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion to approve item 3 as presented by Supervisor Walensky. I have a second by Supervisor Callaway.
Might I also add that my second includes the, as Francine discussed, we've already passed last time we met the nature and detail of the program. So what this is the position control element of this that we're moving on today, but I want the two to be attached so that there's a link between our previous action and this. Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yeah, because
Well,
that's exactly, thank you for clarifying that.
Are there any other board discussion? I will vote in favor of the motion mainly because the board has already approved the grant, and it's sort of pointless to do the grant and not take the position that comes with it for implementing the grant. So I will support it at this time, though I think Darren brought up a good point. If we can use some of this for the computers and the job search efforts that take place within the library system, I think that should in fact be looked at as part of the grant. So are there any other board comments at this time?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be voting no for the reason I stated.
Because you're not speaking into the mic.
I'm going to be voting no for the statements I made earlier based on that. However, I would like to say that I want to be absolutely crystal clear. I am not advocating that people do not get public assistance. I understand people are hungry and they need food. I understand that. I want them to have that. Those are what our tax dollars should pay for if people are hurting and hungry and they need help. I just want to make sure, and I don't think that I've received it sufficiently from my own self or my constituents, clarity or a clear delineation of where exactly these monies are being spent. I want to know that less money is being spent on bureaucracy and staffing, and that more money is being spent on food that go in people's mouths. And so for that reason I vote no, because I don't feel like I can know that that's happening.
I would echo that sentiment. Obviously, the whole point of the program is to get it out to the people in need. Hopefully that's what we'll do. So any other board comments? All in favor, so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
It passes on a 4-1 vote with Supervisor Spellman in the negative. Now we will move forward to item 4, which hopefully will move a little quicker than item 3. A resolution recognizing the contributions of the Mountain Ranch community and assuming maintenance responsibilities for the Mountain Ranch Community Bus Shelter. You put this, Steve? Would you
Yes,
like
I
to
did. The reason I pulled this actually is because it highlights something we've just been talking about a little bit, which is the idea that people can, seeing a need, can actually rise to the occasion and meet it on a volunteer basis and sometimes in partnership with government facilitating it. And that's exactly what happened in this item, and I'm hoping for a detailed explanation and honoring the volunteers that came forward to make this happen.
Good morning, Jamie Azerban with the Calaveras County Department of Public Works. Several years ago, Public Works was approached by the Mountain Ranch Youth Alliance Resource Center with their offer to build a bus shelter that could be utilized by the school children in the community as well as the public transit system. Public Works provided the Youth Alliance with ADA-compliant plans and offered to utilize the stop as a permanent Calaveras Transit bus stop. The shelter, which was built in accordance with the plans prepared by Public Works, was completed entirely through volunteer work and donations, entirely. I would like to acknowledge the following people for their dedication and hours of hard work to make this project happen. Hody Houghton, Chris Sampson, Tyler Childress, Ron Pargett, Sheldon Bissell, Ashley Jones, and Joe Pellegrino. And last but not least, I would like to acknowledge 2 very special people who are here today who really were 100% responsible for making this project happen. And those are Lucille Fenner and Joyce Carrillo. These 2 ladies worked incredibly hard for years to try to make this happen. They were very patient and devoted lots of energy, lots of time. So, and we're incredibly lucky. I do want to say that we're incredibly lucky to have people like Joyce and Lucille in our county, because they really do dedicate their time and energy, and they're not compensated for it, to really making this county a better place to live. And for that, I really do applaud them, because that's very difficult to do. Everybody's, kind of booked on time and limited. And I would like to welcome Joyce Carrillo up to the podium, because I do know that she has a few things to say, and then I'll be available afterwards to take any questions or comments.
I actually don't have a whole lot to say. I just wanted to point out specifically that the real woman behind all this was Lucille. She's the one that started this 5 years ago. We wanted to put this actually at Scotts Junction, because there's an open area there. But when we dealt with Public Works and everybody, that Y intersection didn't work for us. And then Lucille pointed out, why are our kids at the Youth Alliance going across to the Blunder Inn to pick up the bus? So it's like, yeah, right, good idea. So she was really the instigator and the one that kept on me to call the county all the time and get this done. So the nice thing about this is, by getting this done pursuant to your plans, is that now you guys get to maintain it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any additional comments, Steve?
Just one. It would probably not be right to let this go by without mentioning that there Actually, this is the second bus station. Paloma Station was built about a year and a half ago by the community, entirely by the community, with, again, materials and all labor done by local people. The kids on days like this, or rainy days, are now sheltered. All of this is ADA compliant and consistent with county standards. So we're pleased to have the second one and look forward to others happening in District 2 as it comes up and elsewhere if people think it's a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
So
This is a lousy picture. I apologize. If you printed it out this morning and I stuck it in my notebook, so it's got all scratched. But at least you can get an idea of what it looks like. So those of you should come by and take a look. It's a very nice little thing. So you can throw that away once you finish looking at it.
We'll leave it with the clerk.
all right, and I would like to
For the
make
record now.
I would like to make the motion to approve this resolution recognizing the volunteers and accepting this for our maintenance.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Spellman. I didn't open it up to the public, but is there any public comment?
George Fry. I just want to thank Jamie. You know, Jamie has the kind of professional ability to recognize and come forward and recognize the people in our community. She has done this time and time again. And so I just want the public to know that I, for one, and I'm sure the members of this board and the people who are in the audience really appreciate Jamie's efforts to openly recognize these people who do volunteering. I would like to add one extra comment. There are 75 million baby boomers. I'm the first year of baby boomers, 1946. And I've asked in newspaper articles in this county for people that are baby boomers and that are retiring or have retired to step up and be volunteers and give back to their community. And when I came to this county in October of 1977, I got to know a lot of people in Mountain Ranch, and they know how to do it. And we need to learn that lesson from them. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Okay.
Al Segal again. I also would like to compliment the volunteers that brought this about. Also, volunteers in Murphy's who brought about Feenley Park. No tax money went into that. The people can help people without the use of force, without government at all, without taxes. Now that raises the question, since this thing is created by the people without expenditure of tax money or police power, why turn this over to the government now?
Al, Proposition 40 also went into Feeney Park.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'm closing public comments. I'll bring it back to the board. We do have a motion. We do have a second.
Can I make it?
Did we have a second?
Excuse me.
Yes, we
Is
did.
there
I got a
further
second. I
board
gave a
comments?
second. Yeah. I just want to make a comment. Just
Go ahead, Darren.
Mr. Fry brought up about Jamie, and I just wanted to echo what George said. I had the opportunity to meet briefly with Jamie yesterday to make sure, before I voted on this, that this thing was completely ADA compliant, because that's something where the county can fall into some serious litigation if things aren't done correctly in terms of ADA. And she substantiated for me that this was done and was to ADA compliance, and it was built from specs that would enable it to be such. And there was some tax money out because the Public Works Department helped them develop the plans and stuff like that. But it's a good collaboration, and I really am excited about these volunteer efforts to make this happen. You know, the plans coming from the county, and then volunteers for labor and resources to make it happen. And yes, Steve, I do look forward to this, because there is not one bus stop nor bus stop shelter in Rancho Calaveras, which has 3,700 lots. There's a lot of people that live there, and a lot of people that are baby boomers and people that, and school children that would love to have a bus shelter that live in Rancho Calaveras. And I look forward to using this model, and I thank these people for pioneering and showing and, you know, leading the charge on this, because we are definitely going to utilize your the precedent that you've set, and I appreciate your efforts.
Any other board comments? I have a motion. I have a second on the floor. All in favor, so indicate by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the Board of Supervisors. That completes the consent agenda. We'll move forward to the regular agenda. Our 9:10 a.m. public comments. 5 minutes per person. Comments shall be limited to items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Any public comments?
Good morning, Bill Schmidt from Mountain Ranch. We sort of lead the way in a lot of ways. As many of you know, I'm a real estate broker, and part of a real estate transaction, a seller, when a buyer and seller enter into a contract, the seller has a specified period of time to provide the buyer with some information about the property, and the buyer has a period of time after that to respond or make inspections and do whatever they need to do to assure themselves that they want to continue with the purchase. If you're buying a piece of land, you want to have some assurance that you're going to have, in our area, since we don't have wastewater treatment except for on-site septics, you need to get assurance that you can have a septic system. And that requires a permit from the county and an inspection by the county, and that permit is used to be you could get one without proving legal access, and legal access has come back to haunt us because in the zoning code section 17 or County Code Section 1704.030, Section C has been eliminated, and Section C used to permit septic systems, well permits, and permits to construct primary or accessory dwellings. This title of the code also specifies that the Director of Community Development or his or her designee approve the concept or that legal access exists in order for these permits to be done. Now, there's no Community Development Director anymore. The process is unknown. We don't know how to, where to go. We can ask the building department, and again, the concept of legal access really relies on the county surveyor to determine that. He's really the only one educated in the ways of easements and things like that to know whether access to a county road exists. And he's a busy man. You've got him on a part-time. We have a part-time surveyor and a full-time job, and he's got a whole lot of other things to do other than make these determinations. Even though he's in my case, he's certainly made an effort to determine things. We have a title insurance policy, a preliminary title insurance policy that says it's good to go. There's been parcel maps drawn in the 70s that show something, but in this specific case, somewhere along the way, a conveyance of an easement was done. Instead of being a non-exclusive easement, it was actually granted to one person, which sort of wiped out the actual right of anybody else to access this property. Now, I don't know where to go. There's no, in this code, there's no way to, there's no method to to determine this. The burden of proof is turned on to me or my clients to somehow prove this, when in fact it's the county saying, well, we don't know, or we don't have the. There's a very chicken and egg sort of thing going on here, and it's cost me one transaction because the buyer and seller couldn't hang in there.
Yeah, 15 seconds.
Okay, and it's probably going to cost me another one. I don't appreciate that. That's a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
And Mr. Smith may not be aware, but I don't know whether legally this is the case, but the county administrative officer, Jeannie Boyce, is, I think, technically the community development person until we get a new community development director. So I would encourage Mr. Smith to go and speak with her. With regard to the easement, there may be a prescriptive right. If people have been traveling over that and it's never been gated off, then there is a prescriptive right. If you are familiar with East Bay Muds Road, one day a year they put a gate on there so that you can't travel over that road, so that they have the exclusive right of that road. Otherwise, it would be a non-exclusive. The reason for my coming up during the public comment is that I would also like to share with Mr. Joe Kelly that this week is Sunshine Week. This is a celebration of Sunshine Week. So you're probably asking yourselves, what does that mean? Well, this is the week in California that we acknowledge, Rita. This is the week in California that we celebrate the Brown Act, as well as other acts. And I hope that it's not the only week that we celebrate transparency that Mr. Kelly spoke about. All of our elected boards and commissions, those people who are elected to those boards and commissions, need to continue to be transparent, so that all of the people that are represented by government are aware of what's going on. And I don't think in the earlier conversation that there is less transparency when some issues come up. I respect Supervisor Spellman's comments earlier this morning, but many times it's really necessary for supervisors, for people who are on boards and commissions, like myself, I serve as a school board trustee, to go to staff and find out more information. So I just wanted you to be aware, if you were not aware, that this is Sunshine Week, and I hope that it's not just 1 week out of 52, that it is every week. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Well, I find myself agreeing with George so often. Congratulations on Sunshine Week, and we really, Taxpayer Association really supports that concept. One of the, and also the legal access issue is something that is a mistake that was made before, and it needs to be corrected. There is a law in California about prescriptive easements. It's being ignored by choosing, instead of the common law approach, choosing the regulatory approach. And it's causing us problems, and it will continue to cause us problems until it's corrected. And it can be corrected very easily by simply recognizing those roads, that existing roads that are prescriptive easement, as being legal access. It's so simple, and yet we've made it so complex. One of the things that taxpayers are concerned about is the CalPERS issue. This is the retirement plan. And we spent quite a bit of time looking at this. We've met with county officials, who are very nice people, by the way. And we found something that was not first realized. There's, I'm a real estate broker, and when I show my client's property, I receive a listing sheet that's the broker's copy, which shows the amount of commission that's shared with the listing agents. And I could choose to only show those properties that have the higher commission rate, not the lower one. However, that is a real conflict of interest because my fiduciary responsibility is to my client. And I need to show all the properties. And if there's a real issue, then I need to make arrangements with my buyer client for compensation. This is a conflict of interest. And it's okay if it's handled in this manner. Well, just as real estate brokers have a fiduciary responsibility, I think supervisors do as well. And I think that fiduciary responsibility is not to the state. It's not to the state government. Even though it's said that you are representatives of the state and you're here to enforce state policy. I think that you're elected by the people, and the primary concern that at least from my point of view, you should have is being responsible to protect our rights to life, liberty, and property. Now, CalPERS, each of you are part of the system. Not only are you part of the system, the administrators of CalPERS, not the board of trustees, but the people that create the benefits are part of the system. This means that there is a built-in conflict of interest where you're dealing with your own retirement. This is a rough thing to handle. And I would recommend, and I think our taxpayers group would recommend, that you use every effort to pull yourself away from the notion that you're dealing with your own retirement and to think about your fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers and to the public. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Connor. I'm the one-stop manager for Job Connection Calaveras here in Angels Camp. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to make the board aware that there's currently the House Appropriations Committee introduction of H.R. 1, which would eliminate all of the funding as it's currently written to the Workforce Investment Act, which would basically eliminate all of the one-stop centers throughout the United States. There's about 3,000 of them currently that work with local employers and job seekers. And what they're proposing to do basically is just eliminate the Workforce Investment Act and the funding totally. So we just wanted to make the board aware of that. I'd like to let you know that in Calaveras County, since the recession began in 2008, that our office here has served 2,796 job seekers, and they had a total of 12,885 visits to our center. That doesn't include the people that can access our services online, which are some of the things you're talking about, working with the libraries. You can go online to motherlodejobconnection.org and then access all kinds of services that way also. Right now we're working with CalWorks, mental health, behavioral health, and the probation department to provide services to job seekers that are using those services also. So I just wanted to let you know that we're in jeopardy and answer any questions that you might have. Okay? Thank you.
Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Good morning, Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. I'm also a local rep for SEIU UHW, our home care union, and I'm making the time to make a short announcement tonight. In this room, we will be having a short union meeting at 5 p.m. and immediately following at 6, we're offering our first presentation of Caregiving 101A, which is the role of the care provider from the care provider perspective. SEIU has allowed us to do this presentation in conjunction with them. We offered invitation to social services and then maybe someone to answer questions from their department. There will be a union rep to answer questions about union concerns, and it's a question and answer and discussion period where we hope care providers in Calaveras will take the time to come and talk among themselves and ask and have answers for any questions that they hope to have. That'll be tonight. And then it just dawned on me, recognizing this week as something or other, March is National Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Once again, the Public Health Department did not rise to the occasion, so I'm here to remind everyone of the importance of getting colorectal exam, consisting usually of a colonoscopy, not comfortable, but necessary. Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer in America. First is lung cancer, for men, prostate cancer, and then colon cancer for women, lung cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer. But combined, colon cancer is number 2 and the most preventable. Every 10 years, encouraged to get a colonoscopy to prevent a really horrible way of dying. So, hooray, March. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Terry Baker from Railroad Flat. And I would like to also agree with the 2 gentlemen up here who were talking about the Brown Act and how it has to be open for everybody to understand what's going on. I have a 12-page letter to the district attorney, and it is also CC'd to the Board of Supervisors, the county CAO, and the ADRC, and I hope that you read it and understand how many times you have violated the Brown Act and refused any type of information from your secret Citizens Attack Committee, which is actually the Agricultural Dispute Resolution Committee. So anyway, I only have 1 copy of this with me today. I'm going to drop it off with this Board of Supervisors, and hopefully they'll make a copy for everyone. But if you could just please follow the rules, and I think everything would be a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I just want to make one comment. Beware of the Ides of March, for they are upon us.
Joe Kelly, on the issue of public comment in the Brown Act, it's funny, everyone thinks that today is, or this week is Sunshine Week. It used to be every day was Sunshine Day. Every day. Because all boards and commissions, but that changed in 2003 in particular when a Attorney General got involved and changed certain things where the Brown Act does not apply. And it's happened over a period of years. And yet the Brown Act still states all boards and commissions, does not give exceptions. So we are left because we have a legislature that does not go out and bring the laws that are in existence up to date with information, either tracking to be able to go and see what is right and what is wrong, or telling us what is right and what is wrong. But they leave us in a quandary until you have to do substantial research to find out just what is involved and who is involved in the Brown Act, who is subject to the Brown Act. So we live in, I would say, not a sunshine day or a sunshine week. We live in a part sunshine, part cloudy day week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'm closing public comments. We'll move forward to our 9:45 a.m. items. Item 10, a minute order approving contract amendment for PSA Dewberry in the amount of $32,475 for additional services for the adult detention facility and Sheriff's Administration building. This is a continued item, and I think the amount has been substantially reduced. Would you like to introduce the subject?
Yes, I'm Doug Evans with Kitchell. Let me just back up. This is an item that was before you 2 weeks ago. And the item started out as a request for 6 additional services items totaling $215,000. We met with PSA Dewberry and went through a negotiation. 2 items were rejected. Other items were reduced in cost. They revised their proposal. On January 4th, it came in at $69,540. We weren't comfortable with that. We had further negotiations, and they re-revised their proposal another time to bring it down to $59,478. That was brought to the board 2 weeks ago on February 22nd, I believe. And the board accepted 2 of those 4 items and asked us to go back and do further research and bring the other 2 items back. And that's the reason we're here now, is to bring those other 2 items back. Since that board meeting, we met with PSA Dewberry, and the 2 issues are, one is the elderberry, and the other is the additional service relating to the shutdown period, the time when the project was shut down. The elderberry, we've looked at that, and we still are of the same opinion that PSA Dewberry designed the project as directed, and we asked them to change it very late in the design effort, and they're due that additional funding of $17,750. We also talked with AECOM, who is the environmental consultant who was advising us with regard to the elderberry, and I've also looked at their contract, and with regard to liability, I don't believe there is any there. I would freely say, as I said last time, that perhaps we as a team managing this project didn't make the best decisions we could have made at that time, but we made the best decisions based upon the information we had. I confirmed with AECOM that in some instances they have had situations where the Corps of Engineers has approved exactly what we were trying to do to avoid the additional cost for biological assessment. Sometimes they haven't, and in this case the Corps chose not to. We don't know why, but they made us do these additional items, and so we're incurring those costs. The second item is the on-hold period, and we went back to PSA Dewberry and requested that they remove the markup from that on-hold period. They agreed to that, so that was reduced to $14,725, and we're requesting a total for those 2 items of $32,475 as additional services to PSA Dewberry.
What was the shutdown period prior to negotiations?
It started out at $24,148. Then it was reduced to $15,820, then $15,660. That's what was recommended last time, okay. And it's now at $14,725.
Okay. Any board discussion on this item?
I just want a clarification. The gentleman that appeared last time with you from Dewberry, I believe he said that contractually the county had the ability to close down the contract for a 90-day period with no costs incurred for the holdover. And that while we did exceed the 90 days, it was only maybe 3 or 4 days. So is that correct?
It's actually 60 days, but everything else is correct.
Okay. So we held them over 94 days or something like that?
Yes, 64. But
64.
60 is the amount in the contract, and 64, I think 63, 4, 5 was the number of days we held.
So we were a couple days over. If
yes.
we had them come back out and start something, moving dirt or whatever they were, doing, moving pencils, whatever they were doing, 4 days prior to that, we wouldn't be talking about this money then.
We would have needed the board to authorize us to begin again because the board directed us to stop. So, and it was 64 days between being directed to stop and directed to start again.
But if the board had directed...
But if they had have, yes.
If the board had directed and they had started on the 59th day, we wouldn't be talking about paying them this money.
We still might be talking about that. They could claim that, and we could go back on the contract and enforce that letter of the law and say, no, you're not entitled to anything. Yes, we could do that. It does not indicate, though, that if it goes over 60 days, you're liable for the 4 days. It says you're liable for the delay. So it's not like you get 60 days free and everything beyond that is claimable.
But the 60-day mark is the trigger?
Yes.
Contractually?
Yes.
For the board discussion. Jeannie, I assume your office is supporting this recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Chair is open for a motion.
No public comment.
Is there a public comment on this?
Yeah, I don't see the difference. If I get a building permit from the county and I let that permit expand by 1 day, I pay a new fee. You guys treat the public this way, so welcome to see how it's being treated to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to limit comments on this to 2 minutes on this item.
Well, it shouldn't take more than 30 seconds. I think the $17,000 charge is ludicrous. I mean, we can get somebody in Public Works to move this bush. Why do we need to spend $17,000? I'm with Supervisor Spellman. Maybe we ought to put that $17,000 in the food bank so we can feed more people.
Thank you.
Feed them elderberries.
Joe Kelly, I hope that somebody's keeping track of all these change orders in a separate item, so at the end of the season we can look down and see how many change orders took place, which you were forewarned about when you were so gleeful about the concept of we're so low on the price on this. Boy, let's hit it. Anyway, thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comments and bring it back to the board for a motion.
So move.
I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway. Do I have a second?
Dies for lack of a second.
Is there a second?
What happens then, Doug, if we refuse to pay, since that seems to be the position of the board?
Then you get a lawsuit.
Pardon me?
Then we get a lawsuit that we'll lose.
It'll probably end up at a claim sometime during the course of the project, which anytime you go to claim, the costs just ratchet up.
And it's more work on staff. And considering we went from $15,060 to $14,725, we probably spent over $1,000 in staff time in these discussions.
I would concur with that.
Is there a second?
I would like to separate the issues, if that's possible.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just see if there's a second to the motion that's on the table. Okay, there is not. So, Steve, it's in your ball court.
Well, it does seem that we went 4 days over and did trigger a clause. Even though it sticks in my craw, I would make the motion to approve that based on the contractual aspect.
The $14,725.
That's correct.
Okay. Do I have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Tofanelli on the on-hold costs of $14,725. Further board discussion. All in favor so indicate by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. Okay, now we get into the elderberry redesign of $17,750. Is there discussion on that or a motion?
I think this was, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, but Tuesday in the case of a Monday night game. But I do think it's a huge amount for as small an issue, and people did take a gamble, and that gamble was based on decisions that I think people need to be at least partially responsible for. I'm open by the fact that we hired these people to take some responsibility, but not the whole. My proposal would be to split the difference and offer that in hopes of not having further claims.
I don't support that. It was the county who asked Dewberry to redesign based on information we had at the time. What we're talking about is something that this county asked the architect to do based on what AECOM, is my pronouncing that correctly, had said. Mr. Evans and staff went back to AECOM based on where the board was 2 weeks ago. And if we want to subrogate in any way, then we subrogate against AECOM. We are holding Dewberry accountable for something that was recommended by the environmental consultant. I don't think that's good business on our part to do that. And if That's the way we want to operate. I don't think it holds us in good stead because this issue could come up again in other formats with other departments, with other contracts. If we say that we want you to do X and they do X, and now we say, well, we really didn't like it because we could have pulled the bush out or we could have whatever. I don't think that's fair. Our CAO has been involved in this and recommends it. If what you want to do is ask the CAO and Kitchell to go back and subrogate 17,000 or half of 17,000 or something like that from AECOM, then that's the instructions we should give. But we should not back out of what we asked the architect to do.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, I believe we're debating a motion that hasn't received a second yet, and I'd like to find out whether...
I'm not sure you... I didn't,
well, we can.
I didn't realize you had made a motion. You were sort of making a suggestion.
Well, it was inclining toward a motion. At any rate, I would make the motion and see if there's...
What is the motion?
It would be to put $8,500 as the amount that we would pay for this particular item.
And I would second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Do I have further board discussion?
I'd like to give reasoning just so that people have a
comment. Make a comment.
Yes. I'm willing to second Supervisor Walensky's idea on this based on the following. Ms. Callaway brought up that she wanted to make clear that the county fulfills its contracts. And I believe the 5-0 vote that we just took, even though it was substantially painful to some of us to vote yes on it, we understand a contractual obligation. We did go several days over the 60 days. Therefore, contractually, we will stick by, what we said that we would do. And we voted 5-0 to pay for the extra staffing time on that's been negotiated down. Now, in terms of the elderberry bush, the environmental consultant gets paid to have a professional knowledge of what's acceptable and what's not. And they should also know that there needs to be, if there are any consequences to their actions, if they fault on the side of the, in us in this case, there has to be some trigger there for risk aversion. If no one's ever held accountable for negative risk that faults, there's no risk aversion in the future. So I think that Supervisor Walensky, by bringing a compromise to the table, saying we don't like it in the least, but we're willing to split the difference as a sign that we would like these people to be a little more risk averse, especially when it's dealing with taxpayers' money. And if it was that the elderberry bush could have been moved or mitigated in some other way, maybe that would have been appropriate to bring forward at that time. There are many people since that have given all kinds of different, mitigating circumstances or opportunities that we could have dealt with this otherwise. So for that reason, moving forward with the idea that people would be more risk averse with taxpayers' dollars, and that if they're going to call themselves a professional consultant, that they understand the risk involved and that they weigh those things and factor those things. I'm willing to support Supervisor Walensky's motion, and I second that motion.
Any other board comments?
I won't be supporting it. I don't think we're sending the message by doing this to ACOM at all. We're sending a message to Dewberry by doing this or even not paying it. I would like to place it on hold for another couple weeks and possibly have a conversation with Doug and Jeannie about it and maybe finding a different way to pay it. I think PSA Dewberry is due the amount. It's our environmental consultant that did this, but I think there's other ways to take care of it, maybe even through ACOM contributing to it. But before we split the baby here and go that route, I think there's some due diligence needed here and possibly reapproaching them and having a different type of conversation with them. So I wouldn't be supporting splitting it the way it's on the table now. I would be supportive of putting it on hold for at least another 2 weeks and having another conversation with ACOM.
I'll give my comment then. I am not in favor of splitting the baby either. It seems to me this is the county's responsibility. We did ask P.S. Dewberry to do the redesign. Clearly, it is not their responsibility to absorb that cost. So if anything, you would say it's ECOM or whatever the heck they're called. It's our environmental people. But I'm not certain whether it was their decision to proceed on the assumption that we would get clearance from the federal agency or whether it was our direction to them to assume we would get clearance. Whose direction was it?
We were advised by AECOM, but AECOM does not warrant what the Corps of Engineers does. They're a federal agency.
So that was a risk that was assumed, and we hoped that we would get clearance, but we did not.
Yes, and it was a decision made by the team.
Okay. I mean, my sense, I don't mind a 2-week continuance, but it's my sense. I mean, if it were up to me, I would if I were not the chair, I would have seconded Marita's motion and paid the bill at this point, because we're getting a lot of staff time, including your time, that's getting involved in this, and we're just eating up a lot of dollars, in my opinion. And I think we need to move forward. I think we've done what we can do with it, and hopefully everybody is aware that costs are critical and we need to manage it as effectively as possible. I mean, we're talking a $30 million or $35 million project here, and beating us to death over 17,000 with a lot of staff time, I don't think is particularly productive. So I will not be supporting the motion on the table. So I have a motion. I have a second. All in.
Point of order, Chairman Tryon.
What?
The board chose to split, so my belief is that if you chose to split, that you need to open it up to the public to address the second portion, which you are now discussing. We have a motion on the floor and a second. I guess you have to look.
I don't know. Does the board want it opened up for more public discussion, or may we take the vote?
Take the vote.
Okay, I'd like to take the vote. Where are you? Okay. We're going to take the vote, George.
Actually, technically, I believe we've already had debate on both pieces of it. So the fact that it was split was after the full input on both issues. So
Order, Chairman Tryon. Please don't be disgusted with me because I'm asking questions. I'm part of the public, and I have a right to ask those questions, Chairman Tryon. So the second part is the question regarding, was there ever any written correspondence with the Corps of Engineers and a written response from the Corps of Engineers regarding this $17,000? I'd like that.
Doug?
You would answer that?
Yes, please.
Well, the Corps of Engineers would not address anything related to PSA Dewberry's contract. There's significant correspondence with the Corps of Engineers with regard to the elderberry bush, the biological assessment associated with the elderberry bush.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor so indicate by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
It fails on a 2-3 vote with Supervisors Callaway, Tryon, and Tofanelli voting in the negative.
I would like to make a motion to table this for 2 weeks.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion for a 2-week basic continuance by Supervisor Tofanelli. A second.
That's with the intent that you had stated earlier. Correct.
A second by Supervisor Walensky. Further board discussion.
I will not be supporting that. I mean, we're now talking $8,000 and more staff time and the things that Supervisor Tryon mentioned earlier. It was a commitment that we made. It was done under our direction. We're talking about the redesign. We're not talking about the work of the environmental consultant. I agree with Gary that I think there needs to be some discussion maybe with the environmental consultant, but that doesn't get rid of the fact that it was our direction to Dewberry to do that. And I don't think it's going to change in 2 weeks. I mean, Gary and Jeannie and Doug and the sheriff and whomever might get some money out of AECOM, but it still comes back to this is what we owe based on what we asked them to do. It would be unethical of us not to do it and to hold it up any longer. Plus the cost of staff time. So
I disagree with
though
that.
I understand where Gary's coming from, that I can't support it.
I don't think it's unethical, and I don't think $17,000 is going to put PSA Dewberry under the table for 2 weeks.
Okay. Any other board discussion? I have a motion and I have a second before the board. All in favor so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
It passes on a 4-1 vote with Supervisor Callaway in the negative. Thank you, Doug. We'll move forward then to, are you going to talk to Jeannie and coordinate something? Okay, that's fine.
It should be very quick. It shouldn't take a whole lot of staff.
I think that's actually 3 weeks because there's no meeting at the last Tuesday of March.
So it'll be 3 weeks?
It'll be April 5th.
April 5th? Okay, it'll come back on April 5th. Is that acceptable to the board? Acceptable to the motion and second? Okay. Move forward then to item 11, a minute order approving the plans and specifications for the project entitled O'Burns Ferry Road Bridge Emergency Repairs, dated January of 2011. Jonathan, please
Mitchell.
initiate the discussion.
Jonathan Mitchell, Public Works. This item is specifically for the approval of plans and specifications. This is not to contract out the work, but it does allow, it initiates the bid process so that we can receive bids from contractors to construct the repairs. At that time, when we have a contractor selected and vetted through the process, we can prepare a contract to come back before the board at that time.
Thank you. Is there any board discussion on this?
Jonathan, I thank you for answering my question on this, but it still isn't clear to me. Okay, there was damage done to the bridge. We had our on-call structural engineer come out. So did the on-call structural engineer or the county do the plans and specifications to repair the damage due to the accident that we're then going to subrogate to the insurance carrier?
That's correct.
So I guess my question is, well, how do we, did we not pay for the structural engineer? Did we not pay for Public Works' time to do the plans and specifications? Or had we already paid for that somehow? That's because you said there was no cost with approval. That I understand, but isn't there a cost to designing the plans and specifications? Was there not a cost to pay the on-call structural engineer? And if so, how was that paid for? That's, I think, I wasn't clear on my question.
That's quite all right. The answer is yes. We did incur expense, both staff time as well as the cost of the structural engineer to review the structure and prepare the plans. And those staff hours as well as the invoices from the consultant is being prepared at one time to submit an invoice to the insurance carrier in the accident. And that's based on staff's work with the insurance provider that they would like to see, rather than staged invoicing, that they would like to see invoicing for the task when it's complete.
So we're fronting the money for the structural engineer and the plans and specifications to be reimbursed maybe at the end of the construction?
That's correct. We are fronting the money for the repairs. The repairs are, and these repairs are consistent with the repair that staff would recommend be made to the structure in terms of maintaining the the safety of the structure for the traveling public. So they aren't repairs that would be inconsistent with what staff would proceed to do.
Okay. I wasn't questioning any of that. I was just questioning how it was paid for, and where are we getting the funds to do that, with the hope that the insurance carrier is going to reimburse us for all costs. Otherwise, we're getting right back into sort of what we did before, and they'll argue that, well, we don't want to pay this much for plans and specs, or we don't think we should have paid X in the construction. That's what I was trying to ask you, and guess I didn't.
Yeah, that is the concern the staff had, and we have we initially set up a meeting with council to discuss the best approach, and based on that, we have no reason to doubt the good faith relationship with the insurance carrier at this time, and we didn't proceed in such a way that caused there to be doubt entering into the process of getting these funds reimbursed. So we've proceeded by selecting repair options that would be consistent with what needs to take place on the site, independent of the reimbursement process, as well as working with the insurance carrier to seek reimbursement.
So what's the to-date cost?
I'll defer to staff for a number on the total cost today.
Come on up, Tom.
With the various phases of work that go on with this project, we can develop that information and bring it back to the board, or deliver it via memo to the board. Apparently, we don't have that information at our fingertips, but we can provide it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did meet with Jonathan to review the accident and the way they've been handling it. It appears to be a case of liability. The truck went out of control and damaged the bridge. And the insurance company has, as far as I can tell, asked for a reasonable amount of information from us. There's no way we can force prepayment by the insurance company other than filing a lawsuit, which we'd like to avoid. So we're monitoring it. I think if they keep communicating with the insurance company, eventually we can expect a reasonable resolution. And if not, then we still can go to court. So.
Okay, any other board questions? Any public questions?
Al Segala. I'm familiar with that location, and it seems to me that there's also a design problem. This is not the first accident at that location. And what it is, you come down the hill after making curves, and then you make a really sharp curve right where the bridge is, and that's where they've been hitting that rail. And so if we repair it by replacing the rail, I mean, that's a good thing. However, what might be called for is to look at this and see if something else could be done to prevent perhaps future fatalities. I'm not sure exactly how you would do it, but there may be something that could be done that would cover this problem for the future. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
George Fry again. This is scary, Supervisor Spellman. I'm agreeing with you again. No, not. I'm just kidding. My point is that I don't believe the Board of Supervisors has enough information, doesn't have the dollar cost, and doesn't have the guarantee beyond reasonable doubt that the money is going to be returned to the county for the plans and specifications. And I think, as Supervisor Tofanelli did in the last action, I think it needs to be continued a couple of weeks to tease out all that information and then bring it back to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Then I'll bring it back to the board. Further board comments? Chair's open for a motion.
I just have a question, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Segali reminded me, we've been going on for quite a few years about a new bridge, just sort of what's the status, since we're talking about the same?
That is on the county's list of bridges to be replaced under the HBP program. The problem is funding, as always. This is a very expensive fix because the bridge alignment, as was mentioned, is you can't really fix it in its current location. We've met with Caltrans, and they understand that just replacing the structure isn't going to solve the safety issue. So the study that we have is now moved from replacing the existing structure in its existing location to finding a crossing that works safely. And we're proceeding with our initial allotment of HBP funds. The problem is to construct the new bridge will be about 3 or 4 times more than the existing funding. The HBP program.
Could you explain what that is?
Highway Bridge program. It used to be HBR. It used to be the Rehabilitation and Retrofit program, where you brought it up to seismic safety. Now they just shortened the acronym and expanded the program. They split it into 2 components. One is the on-system bridges, which is O'Byrne's Ferry, and the other is the off-system bridges, which is everything else, like pretty much everything in our county that isn't on a major road. And just for the board's information, the county was successful in programming $40 million in 13 bridges in the off-system category, which is wonderful. They just amended the federal STIP to put those projects in, and we're going forward to get the E76s on those. So that's a huge boon for the county. We're going to be doing about $8 million in design contracts over the coming year and a half.
Can you just a minute explain an E76?
An E76 is the authorization from Caltrans to move forward with the project, with actual contracting out to get the services performed. The request for the E76 went into Caltrans. I believe that was last week. Oh, February. Okay, went in a little while ago. So we're expecting in about 6-8 weeks to have the E76 so we can move forward on the off-system bridges. The on-system bridges, unfortunately, there's a lot of competition for those. LA County alone has a $200 million bridge project, which is more than the funding statewide for 4 or 5 years. So our O'Byrne's Ferry Bridge is competing with LA, San Francisco, San Mateo, San Diego, all the big communities. Getting the funding for O'Byrne's Ferry is going to be much more difficult than getting the funding for our off-system bridges. We're proceeding with the design, the concept for where to put the new bridge, but design funding is going to be problematic. It's in process to get relocated. This fix is needed now for public safety until the new bridge is constructed.
There was a total of 13 bridges, is that what you said?
13 bridges, correct.
And were there any on Highway 26?
That would be on system. All these are off system.
Oh, they're off system.
Correct.
That's state. Thank you, Tom. Any other board discussion?
I just want
open for a motion.
I'll move this item.
I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a second by Supervisor Walensky. Is there further board discussion? All in favor so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the Board of Supervisors. Okay, we will now move forward to item 12, a resolution authorizing 2 applications for grant funds from the State Bicycle Transportation Account in the total amount of $1,365,350. This is also a Public Works issue. Good morning, and would you please initiate the discussion?
Leslie Gomes with Public Works. We're moving forward to try to get grant funds. This is an authorization to approve us to do 2 applications, one in Murphy's in the area around Michelson Elementary School, and then in the Government Center from the continuation of the San Andreas Creek bicycle path connecting from Mountain Ranch Road to the new facilities.
Okay. Is there any board discussion on this matter? Is there any public discussion on this matter? Okay, we'll move forward then and see.
Sorry, I don't mean to be a jack-in-the-box, but I just would like to share that I support both of those projects. I think that we need both of those bicycle paths the one here in town and the other one in Murphy's. Thank you.
Oh, I found an opportunity not to agree with George. Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. We recommend that you not approve this. This money, this 1.3 million, the state is broke. If this is bond money, the payments have to be made on the bonds. Who's going to pay this money? We're in a financial catastrophe, not only at the federal level, the state level, but also the county level. What are we doing spending $1.3 million for a bicycle pass? Does this make sense, really? Thank you.
Any other public comments? Then I'll bring it back to the board. The chair is open for a motion.
I'll move this.
I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway. Do I have a second?
It's your district.
I'll second.
I have a second by Supervisor Tofinelli. Gosh, we're even having a hard time getting motions for bicycle paths now.
Well,
do I have further board discussion, Gary?
Well, no, I was just going to bring up, I thought maybe he might, because Murphy's is included, that I didn't, it was two different districts here, but that's fine. My motion stands.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second. Further board discussion. All in favor, so indicate. Well, excuse me.
Yeah. Under the further board discussion part, I just want to make sure that people are aware of my thinking on this line, and because I will be voting no. And that's based on the majority of my constituents at this time don't feel that it's appropriate because of economic conditions, both federal, state, and local, which doesn't in any way invalidate the fact that bicycle paths are a good part of community planning and that they're healthy avenues for people to exercise and recreate and et cetera, et cetera. But at this point in time, based on the feedback from constituents in District 5, they are not willing to give their blessing for me to vote yes on something for $1.3 million at this time for this project. So,
okay, thank you. Any other board discussion? I'll call then. I have a motion and a second. Do I have a motion and a second? I do. I have a motion and a second before the board. That's right. You made it. Steve second.
That's because my daughter went to Michael's.
Oh, you seconded it.
I second. Marita made the motion.
Marita made the motion, and Supervisor Tofinelli seconded it. Further discussion? All in favor, so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Passes on a 4-1 vote with Supervisor Spellman voting in the negative. I've been asked by our community television if we could take why don't we take a 3 or 4 minute recess so he can get his cameras realigned for the informational briefing. So we'll reconvene in 4 minutes or thereabouts.
Yes, we are.
Oh, now we're live.
Thanks.
We're live. Oh, baby.
Interesting observation.
Brought to you live. It's Saturday night.
Okay, I'll introduce item 12. Excuse me, we did item 12. What item 13?
We're missing a supervisor.
Are we?
Got George in front of me.
Thank you.
Newspaper.
What does that say?
The clerk will put the face of recall.
Who signed that, George? Okay, we'll move forward to item 13, an informational briefing, the Adult Detention Facility and Sheriff Administration Building Bid Award Process. This is an administrative item. Do you wish to initiate it, or do you wish to go to Doug?
I'm going to go to Doug, our
Doug,
project
it's all
manager
yours.
for our
The baton has been handed off.
Doug.
Well, this one will go a little bit.
We like you, Doug. We really do.
Should we poll the board on that?
This is Sunshine Week, by the way.
There you go.
I think I could queue up some John Denver on my iPod.
And it's going to rain all week. Sun won't come out. Go ahead, Doug. It's all yours. If you dare.
This is the agenda we'd like to present to you this morning. We'd like to give a brief project status update, talk about the off-site package that's bid already, a little bit of AB 900 funding, talk about the bid package we have on the street currently, and give you a little update on the courts. We do want a little history on the decision to demolish the old jail. And then the real meat of the topic today is the bid award process. We want to talk about that and brief the board because it's a little bit of a complex process, and we'll get into that. If there's questions, obviously, during the presentation, please feel free to stop.
Doug, are we still on for the pre-bid meeting, 6 o'clock Thursday night? 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock?
4 to 6.
Oh, 4 to 6 at the library.
At the library.
Okay.
And let me clarify. The pre-bid is 2 to 4. So contractors. The local contractor workshop is 4 to 6.
Oh.
Is the public allowed to come?
Yes.
Thank you.
At the 2 o'clock time, would that be appropriate for people who are local contractors to, or is that more like generals or something?
It's going to be, the generals are required to be there. We're going to talk about the overall bidding of the project and go through a lot of things with the general contractors. The subcontractors are more than welcome to attend. I don't think there'll be a lot of benefit, but they're more than welcome to attend.
And 4 to 6 is the
local contractor workshop.
Okay.
That's where we're having all the local contractors come. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. First, let's talk about the off-site improvements. As I'm sure you're aware, you awarded a contract to KW Emerson. We issued notice to proceed on March 7th after we got insurance and bonds in place. Unfortunately, the weather is just not cooperating. We're getting rain and rain, and we really don't want to get them out there and tearing up the site in the mud and just make a mess of that site. So and it's at both our concurrence and KW Emerson's request that we not force them to get out there. As soon as we get a little dry weather, we'll get out there and get that moving. The completion date for that contract is June 19, 2011.
Have those contracts been signed by both entities?
They've been signed, bonds and insurance are in place. Notice to proceed has been issued, yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Is there going to be any problem because of the, is there anything contractually written in that would, you mentioned a date of June 2011.
June 19th, 2011 is the
Hey, that's my birthday. What's a great day. Good. Hopefully it will be completed. That'll be easy for me to remember. But is there going to be any problem in terms of, these payment over cost overruns, anything like that, or are they going to be penalized? Emerson's going to be penalized or anything like that if it's not completed by June 19th? If it is that the weather hasn't been cooperating, I mean, is there anything weather related in the contract that would not penalize for that?
Yes, there's a lot in the contract that's related to weather. First of all, what we do is we require the contractor to put the standard number of rain days in each month in their schedule. So if historical averages over the last 10 years say that there was 6 rain days in February, they have to include 6 rain days in their schedule. Then if it goes beyond that, then they can claim a rain day and we will give them a time extension but no additional compensation.
Gotcha. Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on.
Sorry.
AB 900 funding update. This has been reported previously, but the first phase of funding for the project has been authorized by the State Department of Finance and the Pooled Money Investment Board, which is funding from, it's kind of odd, they approved the project in November of 2010, and so they are approving the first year's worth of funding, which goes from November 2010 through October 2011. Even though we're not doing construction, they approve it for a year at a time. So, and that was $6.96 million. We've also had discussions with the Department of Finance. They came back and actually asked us to update our projections to go into March of 2012 so that they can start planning for that additional funding. So they're aware of it and they're knowing they need to come up with additional authorizations as we move through the process. We received authorization to bid from the Department of Finance on February 28th of this year, which was the second green light. The board issued the first green light to bid. The Department of Finance issued the second green light, and we put the project out to bid on March 1st, the next day. This is the current schedule for the project. The main project, which is bid package 2, the plans and specifications were issued on March 1st. We're having both the pre-bid conference and the local contractor workshop this Thursday. The bid date is currently scheduled for March 31st. That may change. Bid dates often are set, and then contractors come in with a lot of questions at the last minute. We may have to issue an addendum at the 11th hour, and if that's the case, sometimes we give them another few days, maybe even a week, to bid the project. We want them to have that time to put together a good solid bid. So,
have you received RFIs?
Pardon?
Have you received any RFIs?
We received quite a few RFIs, yes.
Okay.
How many?
20 so far. Yeah.
20. Jeremy Judd is my project engineer, and he's handling the RFI process.
Okay.
Could you speak in English, please?
Pardon?
Could you speak in English?
Request for information.
I understand that. It's not, it's...
The request for information, yes.
The public. Thank you.
We're anticipating a recommendation for award coming back to this body on April 12th. That's a very tentative date. It's dependent upon a lot of things. So we're going to put it on the calendar yet, but that's just for information. One other thing that I did not put on this slide that I probably should have, another thing that may impact the start of this project is the environmental process. We've submitted all the information to the Corps of Engineers and the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Fish and Wildlife Service. We need to get their approvals back before we can start the project. And I hate to report it this way, but it's sort of a black hole. You put the information in, and when they get it back to you, they get it back to you. The consultants are following up with them, and we're following up with the consultants to make sure that they're on top of it. They've got relationships with the Corps of Engineers, which is the lead agency, but they get back to you when they decide to. So hopefully it won't be a problem, but I wanted to make you aware that it's a potential issue. Any questions on the main project? Okay. Court's update. The bid date has been delayed to May 3rd, 2011, and I spoke with the court's project manager, and I got the indication that is a soft date. That's the date they've issued, but the state has decided not to go out for a spring bond sale, is my understanding, and it was my understanding. I'm not an expert on what the state's doing there. But that's put into question the funding availability for the courts project as to when it would be available. I don't think there's any question that it will be available. It's just a question of when. And so they pushed the bid date back so they can work a little more to define that. If they're not able to define it in a timely fashion, it could extend further. The groundbreaking dates, any dates you've heard, take them off your calendar because they've put that in limbo right now until they get the bid date defined. They don't have a groundbreaking date, and that was as of last Friday. No questions? Okay. I'd like to move on to
a quick question. I understand.
Let's finish the.
Okay.
Let's do the presentation here so it doesn't get too disjointed. Go ahead.
I'd like to move on to the demolition of the old jail. There's been some question about that, so I want to do a brief overview of the items that led to the decision to demolish the old jail. First of all, this is an excerpt from the grand jury report of 2006-2007. The grand jury judged the current jail facility not expandable as well as inadequate. The current jail is a labyrinth of corridors, passages, exit, entries, and holding areas that are in some cases remote from central control. That was just an excerpt from the grand jury report. This is a totally separate item, and I'll bring them together in the end. In looking at the project, the new facility required 34,080 gallons per day of sewer capacity. The cost of that is $1,595,000. The project could have paid San Andreas Sanitary District $1,595,000 for that 34,000 GPD of capacity. At the same time, they had existing capacity in the current jail of 9,230 gallons per day. the choice was made, or the decision was made, to get a credit for that 9,230 gallons per day of $432,000 and pay San Andreas Sanitary District $1.163 million for the additional 24,000 gallons per day capacity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we discussed that quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so that was one of the components that led to the decision. And basically, the decision that was made, which was reflected in the agreement, this information was reflected in the agreement between the county and the sanitary district, that decision eliminated sewer service from the existing jail and sheriff's office. So,
because it was being demolished and it would no longer require those services.
Yeah, those two decisions were kind of connected. So if we look at the cost relating to that decision, there was a cost reduction for reusing sewer capacity of $432,000. The cost to abate and demolish the jail and sheriff's administration building, do asbestos abatement and demolish, was $396,000. So there was a net savings to the project of $36,000, or to the county, I guess I should say.
Can we shift that to Francine and HR to keep one more person from getting laid off?
Unfortunately not.
No, I can't say HR.
Okay. I've gone back and tried to assess and evaluate the decision and came up with these reasons that supported the decision to demolish the jail facility. Cost to abate asbestos-containing materials. There are asbestos-containing materials in the building. There would be a pretty good cost associated with abating those materials if the county decided to keep the building. And yes, we have to abate it to demolish it too, so we incur that cost either way. Structural and seismic upgrades. The building was built in the 60s and had various renovations added on to it. And in order to do a renovation and use it for any other purpose, you'd have to do a complete seismic analysis and structural analysis. And I believe, I haven't confirmed this with a structural, but I believe that there would be structural upgrades required for the building. Fire life safety systems would have to be brought up to current codes. There are things that are grandfathered and there are things that have to be accommodated, but there would definitely be an update to the fire life safety system. Mechanical, electrical systems are very old and antiquated. In order to renovate a facility, you have to completely replace the electrical, not completely, but you'd have to replace the electrical system, and the mechanical system would probably require almost complete replacement. In addition, the ADA has come on board since the building was originally built. There are a number of areas in the building that aren't compliant with current ADA code. They're grandfathered in. If you were going to renovate the building, you'd have to comply with ADA code. That especially applies to doorways and bathrooms and hallways. The impact there is if you have a doorway that is too narrow to a concrete wall, you're going to have a significant cost to open up that concrete wall to make the doorway ADA accessible. There are some times when you have to have certain clearance on the strike side where the handle is of the door, so a wheelchair can come up and actually open the door. In a lot of old buildings, you don't have that, so it would be difficult to meet ADA. The configuration of the jail would not be of the current jail would not be too conducive to conversion. The way it's laid out, it would require a lot of demolition internally to make it usable for any other function other than an incarceration facility. Also, having a majority of the walls inside being constructed of concrete and a lot of steel, the cost to convert would be expensive versus an office building where you have walls that are made out of tin can studs and sheetrock that can very easily be removed. Thereuld be a significant reconfiguration cost. I think the finished product you'd end up with would probably be less than something that the county would be proud of. And as I mentioned earlier, there was no agreement for sewer service to the facility once the decision was made and the contract was signed with the San Andreas Sanitary District, and there was a $36,000 savings. So all hands up, the decision was made to move forward with the demolition of the old jail after the new jail and the sheriff's office is occupied. The question was raised as to whether or not that was a legitimate, the demolition cost was a legitimate cost from Measure J. The question was asked of bond counsel, and bond counsel concurred that yes, that is a cost that could be incurred under the Measure J funds. Are there any questions on the demolition?
Yes, I know, acknowledging all of that, that there are tremendous needs in the county for transitional housing for folks who are in the our youth going out of the foster care and wind up generally in our jails, but the idea of having a transitional dwelling is something that's been important. We also have no or very few places for people to dry out and have treatment programs in a residency context. Most of this relates to our behavioral health department. There are also housing issues for those involved in who are behavioral health clients. There's also money set aside for that purpose. As I last checked, I think it's somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000, which would be used toward purchasing or building a new facility. I don't know whether that makes a difference given all the encumbrances on this particular facility, but if some part of it could be salvaged for those uses, any or all of them, it seems I'd at least like to see that dialogue take place before we tear a building down and then go and spend on another part of the county's budget money to build something that might better be rehabbed. It's a remote possibility given your list, but since they are county departments, I hope they'll be consulted before the final demolition.
And to add to that, the majority of the building does not comply with Title 24 or any types of those things. For 647FF facility, such as you're talking about, the 8 cells that we have currently now is for our maximum security inmates. Those are the only things within that building that, as the building stands, that we could do something with. The rest of the building, and if you remember 2 to 3 years ago, the electrical system, we ended up having to come to the board and request $50,000 when we had the electrical surge because everything burned, everything burned out. But for a 647FF facility, and that is something that we could discuss, there's only that one section of the jail that even could meet those types of requirements.
Well, I know behavioral health is talking about 6 to 7 rooms and spending the entire amount on that. So I don't know what the economic equation would be, but worth a discussion.
Absolutely.
That aside, when the old jail is demolished, what's the plan? I mean, what condition is the ground going to be left in when the contractor walks away and says we're done with our contract? Is there landscaping involved in that? What's the plan?
Well, we'll talk about it. They're probably grass at this point. It's part of the master plan update. You don't have a plan for a new building because we don't have funds for a new building, but it'll all be factored into our master plan update.
The plan is to demolish the building in 2013, and I think that would be a good discussion to have after we bid the project and see how the bids come in, whether or not there's funding available. Right now, there's no funding set aside for anything other than demolition, providing a clean site.
Well, that's what I was, other than the landscaping part of it, a clean site, not something that looks like a war zone.
Right.
Or a Superfund site.
Right. We'd like it to be attractive.
Okay.
Get the master gardeners to volunteer.
It's a great project.
Okay. Moving on to the bid award process. Public Contract Code 2103 starts out by saying a local agency may require a bid for a public works contract to include prices for items that may be added to or deducted from the scope of the work in the contract for which the bid is being submitted. Whenever additive or deductive items are included in a bid, the bid solicitation shall specify which one of the following methods will be used to determine the lowest bid. And that's right out of the code, and then it goes on to have some fairly long paragraphs, and I decided I would just kind of abbreviate those paragraphs a little bit. If anybody wants the full text, let me know. The first option for doing bid alternates, and our intent is to do deductive alternates, is you just look at the lowest bid price on the base contract. You get a bid, and that bid will include a base price, and then it will include deductive amounts for various items, and we'll get into what those items are in a minute. But you have to figure out who your lowest bidder is. One method is just saying, ignore the alternates, just figure out who's low on the base bid, that's your low bidder. Then you can go forward and make a decision on your alternates. The second way is to take the lowest total of the bid price on the base contract less deductive alternates that you identify. So you can say, we're going to take the base bid, and we're going to take off alternates 1, 3, and 5, and whoever's lowest, that's the low bidder. Then you can go forward from there and make your adjustments on your alternates. You could also come up with a method that says you take the base bid and you start removing alternates one at a time until the project is under budget, assuming that the base bid was over budget. If the base bid, including everything, was under budget, you could award it based upon the low bid. If it was over budget, then you start deducting alternates one at a time, and when you got a low bid that was under your budget, you have to publish your budget, that would be the low bidder. That's the third. The fourth is a little broader, and it says the lowest bid can be determined in a manner that prevents any information that would identify any of the bidders from being revealed to the public entity before the ranking of all bidders from lowest to highest has been determined. And that's the process we want to use, which is essentially a blind selection. The way we plan to accomplish that is we plan to have two groups with regard to the bid. There's going to be a bid opening group, and that will include Clay Hawkins and a representative from the Sheriff's Department and a representative from Kitchell. They will receive the bids, they will open the bids, they will publicly read the bids. Those bids will be recorded, and then a bid tabulation sheet will be generated that removes the names of the contractors. That bid tabulation sheet then will be taken and given to a ranking committee, which we're proposing would be comprised of a board member, like a volunteer or a recommendation for a board member, a sheriff, the CAO, Captain Ballard, and myself. And the reason for that is that spreadsheet would then be provided to this committee. It has been sequestered, so we don't know who the contractors are. And we can go through and look and make the selection of alternates based upon what's in the best interest of the county.
So what you're saying is Clay and group will go through and fill out those respective sheets based on the criteria that's being used. And then that ranking sheet will be given to you and group minus the names.
Yes. And then and the purpose for that is that you're making a decision based upon the numbers only, without any bias as to who the contractor you're selecting is, because you have to do that. You can't have a bias that if you see, well, if you take alternates 2 and 4, then contractor whatever would be selected. So we want it totally blind. Once that ranking is done, that ranking will be published, and we move forward with a recommendation to the board for award.
Doug, are we able to do it like we do in engineering contracts, where you not only rank the bids, but also you rank the companies as to who you think is the best company and the second best company and the third best qualified company, so that you can cross-index and make sure that the lowest bid isn't by the company that you feel is going to is the weakest company to do the job? Or are we just totally controlled by the low cost?
We've actually gone through a pre-qualification process to pre-qualify these generals, so we do not believe there's anybody on the list of qualified generals that is not.
Okay, so you've already done that?
Yes.
Okay.
So at this point, it would be ISO.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, let me correct that. There's two things in the public contract code you award on: responsiveness and responsive and responsible. Thank you. And responsible. Responsive means they dotted the I's and crossed the T's with regard to their proposal. If they did not, they would reject it. Responsible is something that we've already determined by our pre-qualification.
Okay, you've done the pre-qualification. Okay, thank you.
I have a question on whether a Board of Supervisors member should be on it, because...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Well, George...
Well, maybe I'm losing my hearing.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because the supervisors are the ones that final approval of the contract. So why would a supervisor be allowed? Because now a supervisor's on that committee, and then it comes back and we should all be hearing it normally at the same time. I mean, that's just sort of been standard operating procedure. I mean, I'm not adverse to it, but that's always been the concern, because the board is the one that approves the contract, and then we have a supervisor on it, and they're saying, well, I was part of it, or she says that I was part of it, and so I know. And you don't have to, and maybe that's something you and Jeannie should talk about. That's all.
I've done that either way. I've had selections where a supervisor was on the panel and where supervisors were not. Typically, supervisors are not more often than they are, but the reason we were thinking it might make sense on this one is this is a complex selection process, and I'll get into the alternates in just a minute, and there's some significant decisions that will need to be made, one being whether or not you build a dormitory. So, but it's totally at the pleasure of the
But that's not up to a decision of one board member to do that.
And the process we would go through would be to select the lowest bidder. If the board chose to change the alternates after we've ranked the bidders, they can do that in the award process. That's in the code also. In fact, I think I should forward a copy of the code to all of you separately.
Supervisor Walensky. Just another question. In alternative to a member of the board, and in recognition of the need, if this is complex and technical in nature, might it be possible to take a disinterested and maybe out-of-county person with a background in construction and bids to put that on as a member of the public? So we have a qualified member of the public, and that we take interest from outside, find somebody who would be neutral and non-bidding and not related in any way to the project. I think that might give you a skill set that would help.
We can definitely do that. Any more questions? Okay. Let's talk about the alternates. We've identified, I believe that's 7 alternates. I'd like to go through them. Delete administration building skylights. Currently there are skylights in the design. Per this item, those skylights will be removed from the project, and the estimated cost is $45,000. There are epoxy floors in the jail, and those are very beneficial for cleanliness and maintenance and that type of thing. They were something that could be removed if necessary to make the project go forward. And the idea here is, let me just step back for a second. We don't know what those bids are going to be. I mean, to be real honest, we have estimators and they're professionals, and they do their best job of coming up with what the numbers are. But I've been in this business 30 years, and I'm most of the time I'm not surprised. But occasionally something will come in and it'll surprise you high or it'll surprise you low. So we're planning for various fluctuations in this thing. That's the whole purpose for this, to give us some flexibility. Because the last thing we want is to be hard and fixed and have the bid come in over budget, and then we've got a real problem because we don't have the funds to afford the bid, and we don't have a way to get there. So the epoxy floor was $108,000. The project currently has a photovoltaic electric system for $991,000. I want to point out that is in the jail, and the goal is to get that paid for through the AB 900 funding, if at all possible. The same thing with the solar domestic hot water at $101,000. The jail skylights, that's not all the jail skylights. In the administration building, it's all the skylights. In the jail, that's about half of the skylights being removed. Delete the dormitory in totality, $3.1 million, and delete the dormitory skylights for $24,000. And obviously, if you delete the entire dormitory, you don't get to take the lights out twice. So anyway, the total of all alternates is about $4.43 million. Now,
question on that. On the solar voltaic system, there are a number of rebates currently available, but does that accrue to a public jurisdiction? And is that calculated in this? Secondly, given the rates that we pay, which is considerably less than market at the moment for this, and what's our projection in the future for that, how do we calculate the life of a photovoltaic system in relation to anticipated county costs for electricity, and at what point does it pay for itself? Where's the break-even moment? I know, and given the current rebates, if that's applicable, that many of these would pay off at normal PG&E rates in about 8 to 10 years with a 30-year life of the system or more. But we've seen no calculations on this, and I'd be curious what your thinking is, given that we pay less here. Does it ultimately pay for itself, and if so, when?
Well, I think generally it would pay for itself slower because you're paying a much lower rate through the Joint Powers Authority.
Right, that's the nature of my question, but what's our prognosis on the JPA, which has actually increased some recently? Do we have more of that anticipated? And also, even if we were to flatline it for the rest of the life of it, does it ever cost out well?
I don't have that at my fingertips. We can take a look at that and come back and give more information.
Yeah, Doug, we can get a grant from Calaveras Public Power Agency up to, I want to say 25,000, 10, 20. I mean, we get 1,000. I can make it 990. And I thought we are eligible for other rebates, but the rate is now 6 cents a kilowatt hour. It went up from 4.5. It's been up to 7.
And the state rebate is something like $2.40 a watt, at least last I checked. So if that's the case...
For the Energy Commission?
No, for the construction of the... It actually pays for that's an offset to the construction cost.
We'll have to get back to you.
All right. Which is huge. It's like 40%.
Any other questions?
Sure.
Okay. Moving on, what we're doing here is beginning to do the analysis that this ranking committee is going to need to take a look at. And what we have, we'll just lay out the spreadsheet for you. Across the top is AB 900 costs and funding. The second column is county costs and funding. And the third column is a total. Now, I want to say real quickly, this is bid package 2. So we've pulled out all of it, and we're looking at just construction. So we've pulled out all the consultant costs, all the other costs. We've pulled out the cost of demolition of the jail at the end, and we've pulled out cost of the first contract that's underway right now. So this is purely looking at the award of the jail construction contract. The estimated cost for the jail is $26,458,000.
the estimated cost for the county, which would include the dormitory, it would include the Sheriff's Administration building, and then the site work is proportioned between the AB 900 cost and the county cost. We've gone through and done a very detailed analysis to split those costs apart as to what the state would allow. Then we've added a 5% change order allowance, which is a contingency for change orders throughout construction. So we're envisioning everything included for the cost estimate, total cost of $47,674,000 for the project, including a 5% change order allowance. If we remove those deductive alternates and took all of them out, some of those deductive alternates apply to the jail, a lot of them apply to the dorm and the Sheriff's Administration building. You can see those two numbers there. The total is $4.4 million. So if we took out all of the deductive alternates, we would envision the cost being $43.268 million. The funding is $44,870,000. So if we look on the far right, we have a potential estimated total cost of $47.6 million and funding of $44.8 million. So the estimate is over budget. And we planned it that way because we've created those deductive alternates that if they're all taken, the project would be $1.6 million under budget. So that's one calculation we need to do, is we need to look at how the total budget works. Then we need to go back and we need to look closely at the AB 900 funding, because AB 900 funding, if the total cost goes below the funding amount, goes below the $26,387,000, the funding goes down. So they will fund you your cost up to $26,387,000. If the costs go over, you eat it. If the costs go under, they reduce the funding. So we need to make a close assessment when we get ready to award this contract to make sure that everything is in the best interest of the county. The alternative we could have done was to leave all these things out, and the current project would be $1.6 million under budget. But in this bidding climate, we're hoping to get everything in the project. Now, I need to relay on some news that I've gotten from Kitchell Corporate, is that they're seeing bids starting to move in the other direction with regard to estimates. And estimating usually lags the market. So what's happening is the market's coming down, so estimators are incorporating the bid results where they were high into their estimates, and they're bringing their numbers down. So the estimates and the actual bids are coming closer together now. There used to be quite a disparity. I brought one project in back in April, presented it. It was a corrections project in Fairfield that was 50% of the cost estimate. We're not seeing that. We're seeing these come closer together. I wish I could give you a good solid answer as to where this project's going to end up, but I can't until after March 31st. So
I have a couple questions on that.
Yeah.
You have $2.27 million for change order allowances.
Yes.
And we have already 20 RFIs. What are the RFIs? Are they substantial, or?
The RFIs to date are actually requests for bid information, RFBIs. So they are questions during the bid process that will be answered prior to bid. We have no RFIs.
I understand that. I understand, but some of the RFIs have to do with the drawings themselves, I'm sure, and clarifications on them. But at 20, in racking them up already, 20, I'm seeing the possibility of change orders down the line escalating, if that is a fact. That's why I'm asking what the RFIs are and what the clarifications they're asking for.
I can answer some of those questions. Jeremy Judd with Kitchell. Generally speaking, so far, the RFBIs, as we call them, requests for bidding information that have come in, minor clarifications to the specifications. They see some storage shelving that shows up in the plan, but the spec that it references isn't in the spec, but in fact, it's just a transposition of numbers. There's been nothing significant that would have any kind of major cost impact so far on what's come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Proceed. To the board discussion. Okay, before I open up for public, okay, Gary, you have a comment you want to make?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea to have one of our board members on this bid opening committee because, and I recommend that Supervisor Toffenelli be on that, just for the mere fact that he has good construction background and everything else. And I've seen this project go on too much where people making decisions don't know anything about construction. And I'd be, not that the rest of you board members don't know anything, but I think Gary would be an excellent choice. He'd come back and he could give you the proper information because he does have a construction background, and I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as for board discussion.
Just for clarification.
Please.
Oh, sorry. It's all right. It's okay. Just for clarification, Marita brought up the question about the board member on the panel. Is it my understanding, or is my understanding correct of what you said, that the board member on that panel, as well as everybody else, would be looking at blind information? So there's not going to be the information that comes to the panel, which includes or could include a board member, would not include names of companies.
That's correct. It would just be contractor A, contractor B, contractor C, and all of them bid numbers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other board comments this time? Then I'll open it up for any public comments. Let's just limit it to 3 minutes.
Oh my God, I have 13 issues. Sorry, Tom. I'm very concerned about the change order issue. And so a lot of companies, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the case with these contractors, but a lot of contractors, that's where they make their money, is on change orders. So I bring that up just in making the announcement. I have mixed feelings about a member of the Board of Supervisors being on that group of people. Part of me says that no board member should be on there so that they're all getting the same information at the same time. If you choose to select a board member, I totally concur with the sheriff that we are blessed to have Supervisor Toffenelli on the Board of Supervisors, who has a tremendous background in contracting, engineering, and knowledge, as he has demonstrated in the past 2 years. I support what Supervisor Walensky is talking about. Some of you members of the board realize, especially Chairman Tryon, that I had sat on the Calaveras County Mental Health Board in the past for over 15 years. And one of the things that I wanted to see more than anything else is some kind of housing for our folks, our behavioral health clients. We have over $600,000 of Mental Health Services Act money to do that project. Also, if we're looking at 8 rooms that Captain Ballard addressed earlier, I think that we should really focus in on those 8 rooms, not only for behavioral health clients, but also for our veterans. Those rooms for behavioral health clients and our veterans are much better than being homeless. and you're certainly aware of that. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran, and there are currently over 200,000 Vietnam veterans in the United States that are homeless. There are approximately 27,000 in California.
You have 10 seconds, George.
Thank you. So I will submit my comments in writing to all the members of the board and county council and to our county administrative officer with regard to the notes that I took today. And I thank you for your time to share some of my concerns.
Thank you, George. Any other comments?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my questions can be simple, but the answers may take a little time. What is the Corps of Engineers doing in funding this this project, if they are? And the next question is, these bonds have to be paid for by the taxpayers, I assume. We had a tragedy in Japan, and the Japanese, it's assumed, will be no longer buying our bonds, our debt. We have a tremendous change happening in a matter of days, maybe weeks, in our bond market, which means that the inducement for people to buy these bonds goes up, which means they're more expensive. Do we have a grip on what the consequences are to the taxpayers based on the existing bond amounts and what the likely increase in those bond interest rates are? I assume you don't have the answer to that now, but I think we ought to know that before we make decisions to obligate the taxpayer. Thank you.
Al, those bonds are already floated. They have a fixed rate. We're not affected by that. The money's already being held. The cash from the bonds are being held by the county.
Thank you.
So, any other public comments?
Joe Kelly, and I do not like your concept of changing this time limit in a short period because of 3 or 4 people that want to get up and comment. I really believe that's somewhat cowardly. The COP funds, the Certificate of Participation, $7,715,000. Did you reimburse the county budget account with the certificates of participation? That would be $3 million, or that you spent out of budget funding to buy that property to get it going? Was that refunded to the county through the COPs? This is all about a word acquisition, which is in Measure J and also in the government code accountability requirement. And within this is what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to acquire the sewer capacity from the old jail for X number of dollars to transfer up there, and you want to use Measure J funds for it, and then use Measure J funds for the demolition of the old jail. But yet Measure J doesn't show that anything, and I've never up until today really heard anything other than previously going through some of the books of this committee that's out there. So this is all about a 9,320 gallons per day old jail. There's been discussion that bond counsel has said, oh, it's okay to use it. Yet there's no written communication that's been provided to me, and I've asked for it. Assemblywoman Kristen Olson's office, when I asked her if they'd received it, she said, no, we don't have any knowledge of it. So I think it's time for this county to step up. I don't believe county counsel's a dumb person, believe me. And I don't think he would just take it as word. He would ask for a written communication. I would also like to see a sewer district letter of the old jail capacity, a transfer agreement. I do know you have an agreement to sever it, but a transfer agreement to be sure that it's there. The concept of deleting the dormitory, are we still in a limbo on how many bed count we're going to have for a jail? I thought that was resolved. The other thing is it's been presented that a decision was made on a number of issues, actually 9 issues, and yet there's not been a showing of a survey done on that building to show what it can, if it can be used for something else. It says, oh, it can't be used. Title 24, no, it couldn't be used again for Title 24. Once it goes out, it's done, from what I understand. But it could be used for something else. For example, of what was described in your executive minutes was office space or storage. Wow, the old jail would be ideal for secure storage. Who could get in? Better than what's down at the other end of the lot here, where you've got those metal containers fenced off that anybody could come through the fence and get into, unless, of course, you have better security.
10 seconds, Joe.
Yes, sir. I thank you very much for this time that you've allowed, rather than 5 minutes as previously. You always do that to us. You wait until the last minute to say it. Say it at the beginning of the hearing if you're going to start limiting. And when you see 5 people here, please acknowledge that there's only 5 minutes per person to be used. 15 minutes. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Good morning. Dan Hendricks from San Andreas. I used to work for the county planning department back many moons ago, and we had a storage unit that had a lot of files. And then I helped move the assessor's office files from one storage unit to another at that time frame many moons ago. And I'm wondering, does the county still have historic files and storage containers? Yes. Would it be possible to consider an interim use for the old jail, storage, for the various departments that here operate in the government center? It's just as an idea. And the previous speaker hit on it, and I started thinking, I worked in Madera County for 4.5 years as a planner down there, and that facility, we had storage in the old jail. And so you had the old cells and all that stuff, but each department had a cell. So it turned out it worked. And there was no need for upgrades. There was no need for anything other than paying the bills for the utilities to service, lights.
And if any department heads get out of hand, we always have a place to put them, huh?
It was really neat going. It was a 1930s jail, and they had these great doors and stuff. It was a great place to have Halloween. That was part of that. Anyway, thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If so, please come forward. I'm going to close out public comments and bring the discussion back to the board. It's open for board discussion. Maybe I'll just poll the board and everybody give their comments. Steve, you have comments? Additional comments?
Just want to thank you for outlining all of this stuff in a comprehensive way. I hope we're able to get bids that will incorporate those things, and I'm hoping you'll take into account the complexity of solar economics and give us something that's more detailed as we make the decisions that way. As regards the appointment on the committee, if you're going to take a supervisor, obviously Gary's the guy with the background, but my inclination is to take somebody with a similar background that does not create a difference between information flow within the board on this.
Rita.
I agree with everything Steve said.
I was hoping you would say that after I spoke to you.
Well, then you have to call in a different order.
Yeah, call in a different order, Tryon.
Just a couple comments. Number one is, if there is a board appointee, then I would be supportive of Gary being that appointee. If not, I don't know that I don't know quite how we're going to pick somebody from the public that's going to fill that role, but I would be looking for the administrative office or something to come up, and maybe you to come up with a recommendation, because I don't know very many people in the county that really deal with contracts of this size and scope and scale and the like. When it comes to the old jail, my inclination is to support its demolition and removal, particularly if we can do it within the what's the prop that the citizens passed?
J.
What?
Measure J.
Measure J. If we can do it within the cost of Measure J, if not, if we can reserve the funds Measure J funds for the demolition at a future date, then I wouldn't mind considering it for storage, but I don't want to have to come back and use general funds for a demolition. I am not at all interested in having it be tenant occupied and have a sort of a rental unit in the middle of a government center. I don't think that's a good idea. With that, I would make the one request, and that is when you have additional items on the budget or you have additional presentations, it would be nice if you would just show have a one page, and you can just update it as the project goes along, which shows the funding of the change order kind of thing to date and sort of the remaining balance, kind of like you did on that one sheet where you showed the projects on. You can consolidate it. It would be nice to see what's allocated as you go down, and you're showing 2.6 allocated for change orders to show what the aggregate is, including the action before the board, what that aggregate is, and what the estimated cost. Just a little cost analysis that you can just look at and see where we are, and then maybe like what percent of the project is completed, that kind of thing. Just give us something that's just a little bit of a checklist, so we have some idea as to how to sort of stay up with the cost of the project. So that completes my comments. Supervisor Tofinelli, comments?
Well, I was going to address that issue also, but I would like to see also the critical path updates along with that chart, is where we are, and milestone dates, how close we are and where we're hitting them, because that'll give an indication too as far as where costs are going to go, as you well know. So other than that, I'm not interested in making the current jail housing units either. I don't think that's viable here in the middle government center. So I think the current plan for demolition is probably the best way to go, although I'm still open. It brought up today by Mr. Hendricks. Yeah. And I believe Mr. Kelly touched upon it too, is using it possibly for some storage area.
And it would be interesting to know if we did something like that, can we reserve the Measure J funding that would have gone for demolition? Can we reserve that for a future date of demolition? Or do we then get caught using general funds at that point?
Our intent and the way the budget is set up is we're setting aside the just under $400,000 for demolition. It's not included in the major contract. Okay. It's something that we would hire a smaller contractor to do at the end. So we'd be going out for bids in late 2012 probably.
Okay, but if we decided to use it for storage and didn't want to demolish it until 2020 or 2030, can we reserve that $400,000 and allow it to accrue interest for that purpose? Or does Measure J have to have a completion date on it?
I would assume it could be set aside for use in renovation of a sheriff's facility, but we probably want to run that by bond council also. Okay. Let's just take a look at that, and then maybe the administrative office can look at what our storage needs are and to see if it even qualifies for that or would fit the bill. Okay. Excuse me, Gary. Go ahead.
I was finished.
Okay. Darren? Supervisor Spellman? What's your preference?
I'm going to break with my own personal precedent and say that I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Well, I have one additional comment, and that's on this $1 million worth of...
3 minutes are up.
This $1 million worth of solar. I want to be cost effective, and if this makes it cost effective just because it's all subsidies, that's just going to get put on the ratepayers of PG&E. And we do have the preference power from New Maloney, so I would be interested to see what an economic analysis would be, but I would also be interested as to how much of that economic analysis is based on direct subsidies. I don't view the preference power as a subsidy. That's something we have. We have excess capacity there, and we negotiated that when New Maloney's was built, and I think we should utilize it to the extent it's available to us. Okay, that then completes item 13. We will move forward then to item 14, which is a review of correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern at the board and staff level. Darren, I'll start with you this morning.
Well, just the normal stuff going on this week with the meetings at Rancho Calaveras and also in Copperopolis at Snaps Coffee on Thursday, meeting with the constituents.
Well, why the hell are you providing coffee to constituents? Why don't you just come and provide it to the board on Tuesdays?
No, we meet at Snaps Coffee, which is
that's it.
It's a local business that has Wi-Fi in case nobody shows up, then I'm not sitting there twiddling my thumbs.
Doing nothing?
And if people do show up, then they buy coffee from the local guy, so they're putting money into the local coffers, which is...
make them feel guilty and they'll buy coffee.
Usually they do without any guilt implied, just by the fact that they're parking their keister there at the coffee shop, they buy a cup of coffee and, put a little money in the till, which is...
That's good. Gary, you have comments for the board today?
I do. I will be at a camera meeting tomorrow at 2:30. I believe, Darren, you're on that committee now, so it's at CCWD at 2:30 tomorrow.
I believe so.
I think you accepted that back in January.
Yeah, I think Steve
kind of
handed me the ball on that one from the camera.
You'll enjoy the company. It's a fine group of people.
Good.
Did they meet at a coffee shop?
No, they meet at CCWD.
At CCWD. I will also be speaking at the Valley Springs Area Business Association luncheon tomorrow at 12 o'clock. That's at the Methodist Church in Valley Springs. I will be meeting with a Delta College committee at 11 a.m. at the Calaveras Unified School District offices on Thursday, and I will also have a COG meeting, special COG meeting at 6:30 in these chambers on Thursday evening, and that's where I'll be for the week.
Okay, Ms. Marita?
I forgot my calendar, but I think I've got some of it under. I've been asked by the Calaveras Arts Council to do a letter of support again for their grant application to the California Arts Council. So if the board has no problem, I'll work with county staff on putting that together. Any problem with the grant submittal for the Arts Council?
The rest of the board support that. Let Marita sign a letter.
County staff time
for the Arts Council.
How much is it going to cost?
It'll probably cost nothing because it's usually my time.
I want to know
if
it's
that's your time, that's fine.
If that's going to solve Harry Reid's problem and we can transfer the cowboy poetry here.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
So they can cut the national, whatever it is, Arts Council.
Okay, so if there's no problem, I will get that agendized. Also, we had item 5 today where we did, I think it was item 5, we did a reimbursement of $5,238 to CCWD. It's been many years since we've changed that dollar amount. Jeannie, I thought maybe because if there's a refund, if it's under a certain...
Calaveras Public Utilities, that's transmission.
Yeah, whatever. It's the dollar amount. Maybe we should look at that again. It used to be like 1,000 or 2, and we upped it to 5 many years ago because it costs a lot of money. Again, time. It was fairly straightforward. I just thought maybe you might want to talk to, and it's usually Public Works and Planning, but maybe it's time to increase that dollar amount. I'm just throwing that out. I mean, it's not a high priority item, but for $238, we put something on the agenda, which was, and especially if we reduce the number of board meetings we have. Yesterday I was at Area 12 in Standard. I met with the state regarding the audit they're doing for Area 12 Agency on Aging. I will be meeting with the audit staff from the state on Thursday as a result of their audit. I have a Greater Arnold Business Association function, I think Thursday night. Tomorrow I have the California State Association of Counties Technical Committee Public Safety Conference call. We've been meeting every week for probably 5 or 6 weeks. It all has to do with rolling up to the state budget. And Jeannie, do we have anybody that's doing Health and Human Services component of that?
Admin staff tries to get on those calls when we can.
Okay.
So we're just monitoring it.
Okay.
But it's changing daily.
And that's it. Diane, if I have any other scheduled public meetings, I will email you. You can put it in the agenda. I think I've got most of them covered.
You done?
Yeah.
Completed. Steve?
I have the Amador Calaveras Consensus Group meeting tomorrow morning over in Amador. I have the Delta meeting on Thursday at 11. That's at CUSD, correct? And I have the Sierra Nevada Forest and Communities Initiative Steering Committee in Auburn on Monday. I also have, I wanted to mention that you may recall that we experienced last year when the state budget was getting a little hinky. A number of our JPAs began looking at the possibility of having to shut down all operations, and I think Area 12, Mother-Lode Job Training, several others came to us with requests. It would appear that most of our JPAs reliant on federal funds have had a meeting last week that where they all were urged to begin to make contingencies on whether the job stuff and others could continue in the event of a federal shutdown, and whether they would have any ability to come to us for the same kind of assistance to get them through. The same agreements are being created, for instance, in Mother-Lode Job Training, where the staff agreed to work for a lot less, reduce hours, but maintain services, but would again need some kind of bridge. I'm not proposing that we do this. I just wanted to give you a heads up that this may be coming, and that if the federal government does indeed shut down, that we will be facing a very serious disruption in services to the people most in need of them. So how we deal with that will be something I'm sure will come up before the board within the next, I'd say, 3 weeks from now or so.
Okay, does that complete your comments?
That completes my comments.
Okay. I'll come to myself a couple items. I will also be attending the COG meeting, special COG meeting on this Thursday, I think 6:30 in this boardroom. The other item, I'd just like to have some board direction on how you'd like me to handle the public hearing this afternoon, particularly on the limits on public comments. My recommendation would be to limit the public comments to either 2 or 3 minutes per person, because I think we're going to have a lot of people here. We have lots in the public record. I don't know who could comment that is already in the public record. It seems like the public record is so vast. Does the board have any particular desires as to how they'd like to see the public comment period handled this afternoon when it comes to particularly to public comments? The county is the applicant, so there's no applicant. We're not appeal or anything like that. We'll go to staff. Staff will give their complete report, and I think that's probably going to be led by Janice. And then we'll go to public comments. So I'd like to limit it to either 2 or 3 minutes. Does somebody feel that it needs to be something different than that? Their board.
I guess for me, we've had a tradition of 5, and I know we're kind of alternating around without actually having a policy that we've set. If we were to do this, I would hope we would let people know well before the date of it, because I would assume, given the history on this issue, that people have prepared written and other statements to read that would normally be calibrated at 5
I think we have just about all the written statements from every citizen in the county.
Yeah, I certainly agree that I've had more to read on this than any other issue that's ever come up before.
I don't know what more they can put in the public record at this point.
But I'm just expressing my reluctance to limit it at this late date, despite the fact that I assume that much of it will be repetitive and already in the record. I just don't think having another process issue added on to the already burdensome discussion will help.
It's the discretion of the chair. It's clearly stated on our agenda that, so whatever you're just...
Well, I'm going to go with 3 minutes if I have support. If there's not, Darren or Maria, what do you guys?
Whatever you want.
We'll go with Darren. Darren raised his hand.
Ladies first.
I always go with the person that raises their hand, That's what school teachers do.
That's what they teach you to do, but before you get to school, your mother, if she teaches you right, and I'm not saying yours didn't, you didn't see her, but I saw her trying to get it at the same time I did. You just saw my hand first. And my parents taught me to let a lady go first, so I've deferred to Marita and let the lady go first.
I think you might ask how many people wish to speak, and if it's, we've had, I don't know how many documents, public comments, but unless they want to add something that's different from what they've submitted. If there's only like 5 or 10 people, that's fine. But you know what? I'll support what you want to do, Tom. I'll support 3 minutes. Stop. It's your discretion.
Marita brought up a good point, and so did Tom, that most, I'm assuming most, if not all, of the people who may have intention to speak and max out their 5 minutes have already submitted in writing to the county, documents that are over an inch thick, that I can honestly say that I have perused and read through. So, if there's any discussion or people have a problem with it, maybe some of the organizations where there's like maybe 10 people here from that organization, maybe if they just had a spokesperson, or I don't know.
Most of those people have written us 2 or 3 times from
I've seen
Tom
that.
Infosimo, from Conley, from I don't know how many we have from the Mayhews, it's just. Are you all right with 3 minutes?
I will go with what the others have voiced, and that is at the discretion of the chair.
5 minutes, but I think I have 4 for 3 minutes.
I'll go with discretion of the chair.
Okay, then let's go with 3 minutes. Is that all right, Steve?
I certainly acknowledge that it is your decision to make as the chair. I was just letting you know my thoughts on it.
This is controversial enough. I wanted to make sure the board's on board.
Just one more. Jeannie, item 8 that Mary Sawicki put out for the self-assessment plan. I started reading this with Yale breaks, but when I saw their peer review and how it was done for both her department and for probation, I think this was really well done. I had a few minor questions, nothing to pull it from, but if you could please express to her.
I will. I think that was grant funded.
I thought it was very well done. I learned quite a bit. Some of it was sort of like real old information, and I thought, well, one, we don't have births in the county anymore, so it was hard to.
Sometimes our data is aggregated with the smaller counties, and that's what's hard to pull out.
Yeah, but I thought, it was really well done. Please.
So now you can self-analyze yourself.
I can't.
Actually, to tag onto that, I was excited to see that we had lower than state average of poverty percentages, which is good, because I know that we have higher than state average in unemployment and those type of things. So to see that the unemployment didn't necessarily translate to poverty in terms of lateral percentages there was something that indicated to me that perhaps there are organizations within the county, whether they be government or community-driven, that help with people in need to where they don't fall into that category.
Okay, I'll go to County Council. Mr. Jim Jones.
I have nothing to report, although I'd like to ask you to cancel item 16, closed session. I think it's premature.
Okay. We will cancel item 16. Does any board member have a problem with that? And it is hereby canceled. It'll come back at a more right time. Anything else, Jim?
No, nothing else.
Jeannie, do you have anything for the board?
Just a couple items.
Okay.
Just want to tell the board that next week in the morning, Public Works will provide an informational briefing to you about the gas tax swap reenactment of the legislative proposal, because that was part of the budget solution last year, which then was negated by the passage of Proposition 22 and 26. So we'll do an informational briefing next week in the morning on that, and then at 1:30, Al will be happy to hear this, we'll be having a session on PERS, and we have a spokesperson from PERS coming to do an informational briefing about our public retirement system.
Okay.
Will that be generic to the state outline, or will it be specific to Calaveras or both?
It will do both, but it will be focused on Calaveras, our actuarials, and our projections, because we need to look at our longer-term cost and some of the possible avenues the board may wish to travel in future years.
And that's next
1:30 next
that's
week,
the
the
afternoon study
22nd, March 22nd, just part of our board, so I just thought I'd give you a heads up. The state budget negotiations continue. There have been several reiterations of the constitutional amendment. The CSAC and Los Angeles County representatives have met with the governor's staff, and I think have actually been quite surprised at the amount of the number of changes that have been taken, that have been suggestions from counties. And so, but again, there has not been the votes to put this before the voters. And so, you know, there's some discussion as to whether or not, in fact, those tax extensions will even make it on the June ballot. So budget negotiations continued over the weekend. They apparently broke down late yesterday, but who knows what's happening this morning. It's a kind of hour by hour.
What happened to the 11th?
That date has come and gone.
But that was the ultimate date.
Yeah. In the legislative process, it's never over until it's over.
Hey, Gary, that was day 60. We're on day 65.
Yeah, exactly. Redistricting, the census data did arrive. GIS has it. Both elections and GIS staff will be attending some workshops this week, and then we'll begin work internally to look at redistricting. I expect that we'll be scheduling multiple study sessions with the board for your direction with regards to redistricting.
I don't think you need to schedule that with the board. Just
I
think the board should allocate that to the board chair.
I thought you were going to say that.
With help from the vice.
There you go. Gary and I'll do it.
And lastly, the board asked me to keep you apprised about staffing issues and hiring. Both the tax collector and the clerk recorder, both of those positions, there were retirements of our elected officials and newly elected officials. Both of those units have multiple vacancies. I have agreed for both the clerk recorder and the treasurer tax collector to fill one of their vacant positions. The tax collector will be filling a tax technician position part-time, and that she will still have a vacancy. She'll actually have a 1.4 vacancy, and that's a very small office. I'm somewhat concerned about that office, just in terms of whether she's going to be able to do it with a 0.6 FTE, but at this point, that's what she's willing to do to help the county accrue savings. And then the clerk recorder will fill a position in the recorder's position, which will also help out with elections, and she will be leaving a board clerk position vacant at this time. So just wanted to bring you up to date. And that's it for now.
Thank you. Does our clerk, Diane, do you have any comments for the board today? Okay, then we will not adjourn. We will recess, because we do have a regular agenda item, a public hearing and possible board action on a negative declaration on Title 17 zoning amendments and a potential denial of Project 2010-031, which is a planning issue. And we will reconvene at 1:30. Is that 1:30? So we're recessed until 1:30. Thank you.